Good evening. Sorry about that. December 12th meeting of the City of Clemson Planning Commission will now come to order. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded on YouTube, and it's also held in person here in the city chambers. Masks are not required, but acceptable. I don't have COVID, but I was exposed, so I'm just being precautious here. And these meetings will be available to view within 2 business days on the YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and look at anything that was said, that works. The Planning Commission is appointed by and serves in an advisory role to the City Council regarding development of our city. We are an independent group and are not employees of the city. So if you want to submit public comments tonight and you're in person, then we'll ask you to come to the podium to speak. If you're attending remotely, I think you can raise your hand and pose questions that way, but there's you can pose questions from remotely as well. So commissioners tonight are Curtis Arnold, Larry Allen, John Crowley, who was just reappointed to finish out for a full term, right? Full term. Let's see, Jackie Myers is remote. Is she? Nope, she's not. Okay. Greg Rice on the end down here. Tanya Hyatt, who is our newest member. This is her first meeting, so she's getting her feet wet pretty quickly. And she's been appointed to fill the remaining term of previous Commissioner Brad White and myself. I'm Elaine Richardson, and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I'll lead this meeting. So thank you all. We have a quorum. Did I say Curtis? Did I introduce Curtis? Okay. We have Art Holbrooks, Jake Peabody from the administrative staff, Kelly Winchester is our secretary, and Stephen Price is here from the IT. And are there any staff that's participating remotely? No. Okay. All right. So we will now open the public session. This is an opportunity to speak about things which are not on the published agenda for tonight. If you want to speak about things on the agenda, there will be opportunities as we go through, as we address each one, you'll have the opportunity to speak. So if you're in person, does anybody want to speak that's here tonight? Okay, then I won't go any further with that. And if someone from a remote location is joining us, we'll leave this public session open for a while to give them an opportunity because of the delay. But we have nobody right now, Stephen. Okay. Okay, so the actual first item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes. And we have 2 sets of minutes because we split our meeting into 2 parts last time. The first part was a regular meeting, and then we adjourned that and had a workshop. So considering the November 14th meeting minutes, are there any edits to consider?
No edits.
Curtis, that's great. No, Kelly, that's great. Curtis doesn't have any. Anybody else? Okay, so may I have a motion regarding the minutes of November 14th?
I'll give you a motion to approve the minutes as presented on the November 14th, 2022 meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Larry. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please raise your right hand. And you're going to abstain with there being one here. Gotcha. Okay, so that motion carries.
Jackie's vote?
Oh, I thought she wasn't there. She is there?
Yeah, she is. She's off.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So then we have the workshop minutes. So are there any edits?
And there's an issue with those. I've never done that one before. This is new. The copy you got, and I have some clean copies. The front page, the minutes themselves, they're good. Mm-hmm. To my knowledge, someone's got edits in that. The wrong attachments. There's not supposed to be any attachments. I sent some with an attachment on that. So the attachment's not. Curtis had mentioned maybe just amending those to approve it, to move on, or we can delay. It's up to the commission.
I think it would be just fine just to go ahead and approve them by leaving the attachments that were sent out. They were not part of it.
Yeah, so that was never solved, but they somehow got printed.
Any other edits? Anybody have? Okay, may I have a motion for those workshop minutes?
I'll give you a motion to accept the planning commission workshop minutes from November 14th, 2022, with the exception of deleting the two attachments that were sent out as part of the package.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. Is Jackie back?
She is.
So we have carries with one abstention. Okay.
Do we need to record her vote? Do we need to record Jackie's vote? She's back?
I'm sorry, Jackie is here now?
She's back.
Okay, and she voted to approve?
She raised her hand, so I
Okay. So then that motion carries with 6 in favor and 1 abstention. All right, so any calls yet? Nobody else here? Public session is closed, so we'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is the Plan Development Workshop, PUD, and
Hello, can anybody hear me?
It's Jack. I'm not sure what she's trying to say.
Sometimes it feels a little delayed, so.
Oh,
hey Jackie,
Yes.
what's up?
can you hear me?
Yes. You may not be able to hear us.
Okay.
I was just making sure that I could be heard and that I was there. I've been on for the last 15 minutes and I wanted to make sure y'all knew I was here.
Okay. All right, so this is PUD 00074-2022, Signet Uptown Concept Introduction and Review. So the first part of this will be the presentation by the developer. And I'll say that normally when we have a workshop, that means that there's no public input. But I think in this case, and Art has said we can do it that way, that we will allow toward the end of this discussion, public input as well.
Yeah, it's up to the commission. And I have a brief introduction on some of the facts too. But it's just to point out, this is a step called out by city code. It's called a workshop in city code, so that is what it is.
Okay. So our presenter is, and would you please introduce yourself?
Do you guys, will you point this towards the crowd, or what would be preferred? I know you all have copies of a lot of these boards, but want to make sure everybody has a copy before I start.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Just the
illustration
same as
should
what
be
we
the
have here,
same.
then point it toward them so they can see what.
Sure, no problem. I'll
Because
bring
it's
this
hard
up.
to see it on the model.
So I'm Spencer Hyatt. I am the managing director with Signet Real Estate Group. I'm out of Jacksonville, Florida. We own 412 College Avenue and are under contract under 408 College Avenue, and combined are the basis for this project that we're submitting before the Planning Commission for plan development zoning. So I know this is a critical step in the process for us, so we'll share a little bit about the project itself, but we kind of we'll present, but love to hear feedback throughout this, and we don't have to wait till the end if you have comments, but I think it's important for us to go before you guys and just gain your feedback, comments on this, because we know this is a multiple step process that we'll submit before you over the next couple of months. So from this, then we'll speak about the basics of the project, which I'll share for you guys out in the out from the public. So the project itself, it contains between 408 and 412. It's a mixed-use development 172 units as it's currently designed. We're looking at this kind of the gateway entry into the Uptown District along College Avenue. Within the program itself, we've got 6 stories with ground floor walkable retail totaling around 7,500 square feet currently designed, with, again, the 6 stories of residential above. What we'll share in a minute is kind of the context of the contours of the site and kind of the approach for it. But what we've tried to do to incorporate within the design itself, a couple of different things fed into this. We have our design team here to kind of gain any more feedback, but basis of design was kind of a combination between the new architectural standards that's kind of been run through from the city of Clemson, that we've tried to adopt, some of the Uptown framework that was done by some of the sub-consultants recently, as well as the most recent comparable project across the street, which is the Bixby. Especially from the focus of materials, that we try to look from both from a combination of siding as well as kind of brick up the facades. We really try to kind of focus that along kind of the College Avenue, as well as kind of a certain amount of step backs within the facade to not give a kind of monolithic feel. But what we try to do is kind of match the exact height of Bixby from the College Avenue side. So the scale of it matches almost the exact height elevation from the roof point. And then as you kind of go along Knox, which we'll talk about because I know that's critically important, kind of focus along the elevation. So the one thing we really wanted to focus when we were kind of going through the design of this is there's a mix of unit types within these 172 units. There are no 4-bedroom units within the unit mix. Our focus has been on some studios, 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and 3-bedroom units. None of these will be rent by the bed, with the obvious exception of studios and ones. And the intent is to have a diversity of offerings of unit types and treat it more like a market rate housing project as opposed to purpose-built intentionally for students. So within that, we understand there will probably be some students that will be a mix of that, but our goal has been to try to have as much of the diversity of that, staying away from purpose-built 4-bedrooms, and kind of give it to where it has marketability to other people beyond just the students that exist within Clemson. So within that, that's kind of what made up the unit mix within that versus whatever the bed count is from that perspective. A few other things that we wanted to focus on, which I think is paramount for us, which I've got here for you guys to see. This is the cut. One of the interesting project or the driving factors of this project is the elevation from front to back. What you will find is that the roof line at 68 feet matches exactly the roof line of the Bixby. But on the back of Knox Lane, the elevation grade goes up by a total of 25 feet from College Avenue to Knox Lane. So what we have tried to do is to cut into the site within the conceptual design so it doesn't have the same impact to Knox Lane and kind of the neighborhood backing up to that, where you're only seeing 42 feet from the roof line along Knox. That, along with kind of a setback along from our property line, again, trying to kind of limit the same impact from the residents there, but still kind of keeping the same scale that you see kind of in this urban corridor and Uptown District that you guys are trying to achieve within that framework. Before I go any further, any other comments or feedback? I think the biggest thing for us going through this PD process is making sure this is kind of our conceptual design. We understand that there will be some changes made, and we're trying to kind of be receptive to any of the feedback that we can kind of make possible within this, but still excited about the opportunity that this site presents, especially kind of in the growing area in this district as it continues to kind of be built up.
Any questions at this point?
I mean, you mentioned the different bedrooms but this is all apartments. That's just one type of housing.
Yeah, all apartments.
I have a question back. So
Can we hold public comments to the end and questions? Okay. My question is about the 2.14 acres.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think the actual acreage for those two lots is more like 1.96.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So if it's under 2, we can't do it.
Yeah, so what we're contemplating here within, it's not just the square footage within the property itself, but also kind of the public right-of-way that we're looking to make public improvements from. You guys can't see it. So where we've kind of broken this out is the amount of acreage within our calculation was based upon the right-of-way that we're planning to improve from the sidewalk widening, as well as the infrastructure improvements and the square footage associated with that. So that was based upon calculations, kind of where we showed both from the public improvement area at 0.4 acres, the stormwater improvement area based upon the improvement we have to do within the public right-of-way at 0.12. And that was kind of our basis for the calculation.
So can you count right away as part of the property?
Well, it's pretty common actually for rights of way. If you think about Patrick Square, you know, the right of way can be part of a PD. But we'd have to agree to it. You know, being the city would have to, they would be one responsible for it. They would have to, the city at probably council level would have to say, yes, we're on board with that, because multiple property owners can be part of a PD, but they have to agree to it.
So is that something you've done in the past?
No?
I've not been involved, but at this level, I don't see any issue with it. Ultimately, it would be a decision of council to approve the PD anyway. They're going to have to be agreeable to all of this. So,
Yeah, we tried to just limit the bounds to what the improvements we were intending to make and not any other infrastructure improvements that go outside the scope, but truly the direct impact from our project, especially from the right-of-way, given kind of the new, kind of widening of the sidewalk that is currently owned by the city. So we tried to include that as well, given we would kind of take the responsibility for any of the improvements in that area.
And what's the setback going to be on the front?
So if you'll notice, if you're not, I'll break this up again. So we have a minimum setback. So if you kind of see the undulation between this, the minimum setback we have is 15 feet from the right of way, as far as much as 25 feet. So this kind of goes back to the scale and kind of setbacks of the building facade itself. But minimum setback from the right of way would be 15 feet. Even from the public sidewalk, minimum 18 feet, and then we're kind of seeing this far recess back as 25 in certain areas to have allowable sidewalk and green space within kind of the streetscape.
Could you talk a little bit about the buffer area behind the building on Knox? And if there's going to be a buffer or some sort of setback off of that area?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a significant issue, I think, for most of the residential area.
Agreed.
On how that's going to be handled as far as issues, noise, light, etc.
Yeah.
Some sort of green space between there, etc.
Yeah, so
looking at the drawing, it doesn't appear there's any of that.
Sure. And so we kind of gave the base level drawings for this to start knowing that our approach in designing this project was that we would have no means of ingress or egress aside from maybe emergency stairwells off the back that would enter off of Knox. So we fully intend to kind of treat all parking coming in from College Avenue, all waste, all back of house supporting any retail coming in and out of College Avenue. So first and foremost, vehicular traffic would be non-existent, at least servicing our building, because there's no means of entry point or ingress from that. Secondly, within the building facade itself, no balconies along Knox Avenue. So we're not giving any kind of treatment to the residents that will be coming out on that. Only windows is kind of the way we would treat that from any of the residential units backing up to Knox. Then third, what we're looking at currently is a 15-foot setback that we look at from the buffer. What we're looking for is maybe feedback from you and the community and what you think is probably the best way to do that. Whether we've looked at in the past, it's been heavy vegetation, landscaping, trees, those kind of areas to continue to buffer out. We've also seen kind of live wells, kind of gravel and opening to kind of keep any kind of physical buffer from any kind of impeding pedestrian traffic coming over, to kind of give a hard line of step back. But those are the things that we have kind of contemplated as ideas as we're going through this. But typically, probably the best case scenario would be some level of landscape. I think given what our intent, we also have kind of a landscaping coverage ratio that we're trying to hit, which is very difficult in an urban area. I know we have plantings along College Avenue, but looking at kind of the type of species and trees that we could plant along Knox Avenue to kind of give that much more of a screening and buffer area to, the residents that back up, to Knox Lane and that neighboring area.
So what's the actual elevation over Knox?
42 feet.
42 feet?
42, yes, sir. So 68 in the front and 42 on the back.
Can I?
As far as, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Finish up.
I was going to ask, because of the topography of those particular properties, I was just curious as to what the removal of material out of there, how that was going to be handled.
It's going to be a lot of dirt.
There's a lot of dirt there.
A lot of dirt's going to be going away. What we're trying to do within kind of more the detailed design, if we get to that level, within kind of, we're looking at a 2-story podium, concrete cast-in-place podium with the floors of residential built above. So what you look at is almost the podium itself would kind of cut into the site where you would not see any visible parking from Knox Lane. So from that, what we're talking about from kind of the grade up and kind of the ramp ups, maybe we get some benefit of not having to excavate the entire site, but there's going to be a pretty significant amount of excavation there on site from what it would be. But all of that is kind of with the intent of trying to provide the necessary parking, hopefully surplus to the public, and then as well as not seeing any kind of visible parking on the back end of Knox.
So right now, you're only showing the one curb cut on College, is that?
That's correct. So there'd be one curb cut there. We may look at one small curb cut for dumpster withdrawal that can kind of roll off along that elevation if need be. But to present right now, we're looking at the one curb cut for vehicular traffic.
I would discourage you to have more than one curb cut.
So you said a curb?
I said I would discourage you from having more than one curb cut.
Oh, yeah.
That's a significant issue on College as far as traffic flow is concerned.
As a point of clarification, would that be even the one for like the waste for deliveries and waste management?
Possibly. I would assume that waste management would be handled early in the morning. That may or may not be a problem, but that's just that's a major impediment to the flow of cars down College if we have additional traffic in there, especially large traffic.
Yeah, and that's where we're kind of reducing down from the 2 curb cuts down to 1 in this current design, and also part of the intention behind seeing some of the heavier setbacks closer to where that vehicular entrance is, just to give more visibility, whether that's for the retail tenant or some other setbacks, so they give a little bit more space and viewing point from a safety perspective.
So that's a 15-foot setback on the Knox Lane side from the edge of the road to the building.
Yes, ma'am. 15 feet?
15 feet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what
So the only really green space that we're going to see is behind the building and some planting in front.
In the front, what you will notice too, along some of the largest setback, contemplating kind of a green space, more of, depending upon the retail user, more of that indoor-outdoor green space for that. You'll see in the elevation, I think one of the is noting the areas we look for potential green space within the, I think it's the site plan that we're showing.
So overall, just as a quick observation, it appears that we'd be losing a fair amount of cover of this.
Correct. We would. Yeah, we're looking at the opportunities would be along College, along Knox, and then of course any courtyard plantings that we could see beyond there. So we understand. I think there's a 30% requirement there too, but given kind of the urban condition of that, try to maximize what we can within kind of the context of the building, but beyond that, there may be seeking a waiver based upon what we can achieve within those corridors.
And the stair openings on Knox, those are emergency stairs.
Emergency stairs. Yeah, emergency only.
And they'd be alarmed.
Yes.
Do you know what the percent of pervious property is in there?
I'm sorry.
The percent of pervious
You say impervious?
Pervious, not impervious, pervious. Opposite, well,
The opposite of impervious.
It's one of them, either impervious
The
or
percent on
pervious.
that, I don't know, I don't know that currently. I don't know if you would even know that at this point.
We haven't done the calculation yet because the front kind of hasn't been worked out exactly landscaping sidewalks.
So what that count would look like.
And that's a mighty boring side facing that neighborhood,
Okay.
that straight up and down on Lots Lane.
So the straight element, straight up is what you're saying?
No articulation at all in there.
We have some on the two bedrooms, with the two-bedroom unit heights that back up to that have some articulation within it. We can kind of show that. You kind of see a little bit in the elevation. Kind of within the plan itself, but you can kind of see within the unit plans itself, a little articulation along this and within the north-facing side, kind of coming down.
How big are those articulation features? Like, how many feet back does that go?
As far as the stepping of the sign,
Yes, on the Knox side, roadside, or the roadsides there. How far in are you coming?
we currently have, 5 feet,
5 feet?
that building steps. Might be 4 feet. We don't have a dimension.
Okay.
I think the plan showed that stepping.
You guys good on that? I don't want to interrupt you. You guys are good on, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So to clarify, just to make sure I'm reading, this is one building, correct?
One building, correct.
Okay. I'm going to read something from the Enabling Act about their definition of what a planned development is. It's a development project comprised of housing of different types and densities and compatible commercial uses or shopping centers, office parks, and mixed-use developments. Now, something that's always stuck out to me with this is the housing of different types and densities, and I understand how that works. Instead of rezoning a bunch of different little sections, you can put in stuff, but that's why I asked earlier, is the only type of housing you're planning is the traditional multifamily apartments, correct?
Yep.
Okay, there's a couple other things in here in the city code about why we would do a PD. And one of them is to preserve natural and scenic features and open spaces of an area. So we may allow you to adjust a setback on one side if it saves a rock formation or something on this side. But by these plans, it looks like you're building 99% of the lot. Is there any specific features or anything that your open spaces you're preserving or need this PD to preserve?
So the only thing we're looking at is, the main thing we've kind of tried to focus on was, again, kind of the setback and articulation both on College Avenue to have a little bit more of a setback. To your point, we're closer to probably 90% of the site as a whole, I think, which is pretty typical in kind of this, kind of urban condition and mixed use. And so, yeah. So what we're trying to do is, most from kind of the type of uses, not just from the residential side, because you can do studios 1s, 2s, and 3s, as opposed to 90% 4 bedrooms or 3. I think we look at that as kind of a mix of type of occupants that we can kind of attract within there from the type of users. Down getting to the ground floor, I think what we really think is important is kind of continuing on this kind of walkable retail environment to keep this kind of a more pedestrian-friendly piece, whether we incorporate that ability for types of users, green space within that pocket park kind of environment that feels a little bit more green than nothing but sidewalk. I think that's what we're trying to understand and achieve here.
I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, other than the fact that you could build to 67 feet instead of the current limit in the CM zoning, what reason is the application for a PD over building straight zoning in that area?
What building, other than just to say that was kind of the ultimate latitude to go and present, and if you guys or the city council had feedback on that beyond what was the native zoning, I think this is the best process to accomplish that, whether that is public improvements, street walk improvements, sidewalk, public infrastructure, mix of uses, and that's what we felt this had the most latitude, both from a perspective of submittal and feedback from the city to move forward the project.
Okay, but so the reason you're submitting under a PD is to get feedback.
Yeah, so this is, instead of going by native zoning, I think we all...
Well, my question is because under the current zoning, I believe you'd be limited in height as well. You would not be able to build this under the standard CM zoning that we currently have, correct?
Correct.
So that would be a benefit to you if you got a PD. If, like I said, everybody has different interpretations. I'm not a lawyer. This is my interpretation of the definition and intended use, and I understand that everybody has their own. But that's what I'm trying to figure out, because everybody's going to have opinions about design, about.
This. Maybe this. Now I really can't hear. Try it.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand here is that other than getting input on the design of this project, which is a big benefit to the city if we get to have a little bit of say of how it's developed and goes there, but you guys get a massive benefit of a couple extra floors of rentable space. Now, but there has to be I've lost a word for it. There has to be a reason to grant that PD. In other words, it can't just be that every time somebody wants to do something, and because to me, my initial thoughts on this are, should be a zoning variance. You want a variance in height is basically what you're looking for. And to me, that would be go before the boarding zone of appeals and ask for a height variance. So that's what I'm trying to get at, and maybe you can speak directly to that, of why this project should be a PD versus being straight zoning, because it seems like this is just a commercial mixed-use building going in a commercial mixed-use district that you want to make taller.
Well, I think it's also important to think about the opportunity within this for any kind of public improvement, whether that's, again, kind of street frontage, infrastructure, public parking, a lot of those elements that would be limited, not part of any other kind of zoning areas. And then we all understand the scale of this project is bigger than what's under the CM currently. But given, I think, what we're trying to kind of accomplish when we sit back over the past couple of years, going through kind of a lot of the updates and holdups, I think it was important to kind of gain this feedback, given this is such an instrumental area of focus, I think, for everybody, especially for the uptown district, as we've seen. I think this has got a lot of eyes and a lot of feedback, so I felt it was important. If we're going to go to something of the scale, important to kind of go through more public process.
Okay, but I mean that building, this is the only way that building gets built, is through a PD. I mean, that's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. Is this building doesn't fly under CM or whatever? So, if you guys,
Financial.
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. It's like financially viable. This is only viable for you guys at the 67 feet up front or whatever. Or I've kind of I don't believe that a PD should be thrown at every lot that has a thing. A PD is there for a very specific use, for use in very specific situations where you need flexibility to save a unique scenic feature or something like that, or provide something. Like, to me, this is just a standard building that is going on a standard lot that just wants to be taller than what's currently allowed. And I need to know a reason for it to be a PD, and other than I can't build it at 4 stories and make money.
So beyond economic viability of it?
Yeah, like if it's like, okay, I don't see, on our current CM standards, if we build this building, we won't make money, so we're not going to build the building. So we're asking for a PD so we can build it and make money, and we'll do these other improvements too, which is a benefit to the city. I'm not denying that. But I don't want to trade improvements for a zoning that I don't think necessarily apply. I need to hear why a PD applies to this piece of land and this project versus I just want it to be taller so I can put in more units.
Yeah, I think the best way to kind of explain that, and I'm trying to track.
And I know we're gonna fumble through this because and believe me, I understand. And I'm not being critical. It's just one of those things where I kind of need clarification on that, because to me, the city zoning standards, whether I agree with them or not, that's what city council has in place for those districts. PDs are for exceptions and unique projects, not for, I don't like the current zoning, I want it to be 20 feet taller.
Yeah, I think we felt this was impactful enough for this area that this kind of need to go through the process. And I know I probably don't want to be repetitive with that either, but at the same point, given the scale, given the size of that, if we're talking 1 story above or what have you, that's kind of an incremental increase in scale. But I I think given this would be kind of one of the first projects in this corridor after the new architectural standards and some of this, I felt it was probably important this would be an appropriate path to go for the zoning that we were trying to see. But that also gives kind of an independent zoning, which allows for any other improvements or any other items that could be of public benefit to be included within that where the other process is not necessary.
So I guess the easy way to ask this question then is, does this project go forward as standard CM zoning if the PD gets denied? Okay.
Let me ask the question a little differently, John. What redeeming factors does this facility provide to the city of Clemson that justifies basically filling up the entire 2 acres with one big building? There's really no special features to any of other than it's commercial on the first floor. And they have 170 beds essentially. What's the trade-off here? What are we really talking about? What are we bringing to the table?
Sure.
What are we enhancing the community with when we move forward with this building?
Yeah, well, I think any kind of project that's going to move forward in kind of seeding fashion needs to be, at least.
Architectural features, and I do have that on my list.
You are muted.
That would be my personal thought.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press *6 to unmute.
Functionality.
So probably more uses of the word
You are unmuted.
design, aesthetic of it, as much as anything else.
I wouldn't say everything else. I think it's a combination of all those.
But I think John's point and Curtis's is as well, going back to why we have PDs in the first place. And I'm just reading again here, it's for the improvement of design, character, and quality of new mixed-use developments and preserve natural and scenic features of open spaces. You're not going to have any open spaces. There's more open space on that property right now than there will be after this development, right? So again, back to the question that Curtis is raising and the point that John's raising is, for us to move in the PD direction, there's got to be some added value to the citizenry of Clemson.
And that's kind of you said. The way that I was trying to say it is, so if you wanted to come for a PD and you said, you know what, I can't do this at 4 stories because I want to have this little this public park out front, or this feature, and it's only financially viable at 6 stories, then as a PD you can say, okay, I've got my building, I've got my park. There we go, that's a unique aspect, so we may be willing to grant you the PD to get your extra height or whatever, but this just seems like a 2-story taller building than what city council has currently on the books to go in that area, if that makes sense. Like, if you needed the extra height, like I said, to make it, you get 4 stories, you get X number of units on that lot. And you're like, all right, it doesn't work with less than that number of units, but we want to cut out this spot to do something special with. Okay, in order to keep that number of units, you could say, well, if we do the building at 6 stories, which doesn't fly in CM, but maybe we can get a PD because we're adding this special feature, then sure, that would fly as a PD. But just having it 2 stories taller for the benefit of being, utilities upgrade, sidewalk improvement, and this kind of stuff is kind of just, it's almost, I do not mean this in any kind of negative way. I promise, it's just the only way I can think. It sounds like buying 2 stories of height in that zone, if that makes sense. Hey, if you give us this special PD, we'll upgrade your sidewalks and do this, and we'll be 60 foot tall for a building that should have been 40 foot or whatever it is right now.
So the other thing would be to consider for us would be, again, kind of the preservation of green space, as well as some of the stuff that we've already kind of playing on the street frontage. So I think looking at that seems to be a pretty big, important factor to you guys. Is that I'm trying to just make sure I'm getting
I think the important factor is to make it a PD is you have to have something that sets it aside from just a building. In other words, right now, I think most of us will agree when we look at this plan, this is one big building, whatever type of apartments you put in it. It's got commercial and it's got apartments. It's a mixed-use building, which is the entire purpose of that CM district, is to have mixed-use buildings. And city council has gone back and forth about heights and regulations. It's been a whole big thing for a couple of years. They've settled on what they wanted or whatever, and that's what they want there. And coming forward with a PD with basically a mixed-use standard building. Now, it's got architectural setbacks and all that kind of stuff to make it look pretty, but basically just a mixed-use building, not a mixed-use development, if you understand what I'm saying. I mean, development gets thrown around. In other words, a wooded piece of property is developed anytime you build something on it. So technically, you could say that's development. But that's basically just a mixed-use building versus I've got a mixed-use building next to a row of townhouses. That would be an overall development because you have a couple of different things going on, if that makes sense.
So
and that would also.
So multiple uses, but tangential multiple uses versus stacked multiple uses.
Well, it's not just that in the CM district. Basically, you have a mixed-use building, which is part of a planned development, not a planned development in and of itself. A planned development, like I said, according to the Enabling Act, a planned development, their definition is housing of different types and densities. So not just 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments, but maybe you've got apartments and townhouses and single-family detached or something like that. And traditionally, you need 2 acres to do a new zone or 4 acres if it's in R20. So you're like, you know what, we don't have that. We want to do 1 acre of 6,000 square foot lots, and we're going to do 2 acres of 8,000 square foot lots. And we can't do that under the current rules. If you guys give us a planned development, we can make all that happen, and it'll be a nice overall deal.
Got it. Okay.
A little earlier, you said, you made the statement about it being impactful enough. Could you clarify that, what you meant by that?
So impact, I think given when we were originally going through the design and trying to match kind of the scale across the street, knowing that this would be the entry kind of into this uptown district, that was kind of what the statement might kind of impactful, not just from the standpoint of knowing this would be a significant project that obviously gets quite a bit of feedback, and rightfully so. So that was kind of the basis.
Do you have something lined up for the retail space?
Yeah, so we've spoken to basically every single user here. So what we're intending is we'll see what the ultimate design of this allows, but kind of looking more food service, especially from the standpoint of, I think there's still a short supply of that within this area, along with some other supporting retail. I think we've also spoken to every single kind of retail broker, basically, on kind of canvas what the users would be, but we've also spoken to different grocers that obviously are opposed to it,
Is this going to be a pet-friendly building?
yes.
Okay, then where's your pet dog?
Backyard. Yeah.
like a dog lot or something?
Sure.
Because I can tell you right now, the issues that they're having already on the backside of Dockside, with people walking their dogs into the neighbor's yards back behind them. I'm not cleaning up after them.
You know, given the nature of the dialogue that I've experienced the last 3 or 4 years, whatever I've been on this, you know, the citizenry is very concerned about the level of development. And if we're going to move in the direction of a PD or deviate from the CM, there's going to have to be some convincing, thank you, some convincing advantages to the citizenry. Otherwise, you know, they're going to be very concerned about any kind of development, and it falls outside of what we've already deemed the upstate development zone, which we have a RFP going out soon to be developing that. This is outside of that. It's not even within that zone. So you're really going to have to come up with some compelling reason why this is a benefit to the citizenry of Clemson. And, you know, there's so much that's not fitting to allow you to make a strong, compelling argument for that, because it's outside of the upstate zone already, which is an issue in my mind. Uptown. Excuse me. Uptown. I'm all rattled tonight for some reason. Maybe took my hearing away. So I'm sitting here saying, okay, what can be done that where the citizenry would see this as an advantage? Right now, with all the development that's gone on with Bixby and U Center and everything else, I mean, you know, the public is not that excited about what they've seen go on. And this would be just adding one more dagger. And so you got your work cut out for you.
I guess a couple of the other items that may not, I'm probably not ready to address that as yet, but certainly we want to be sure that we addressed lighting, especially to the adjacent areas. Dark skies lighting on the outside is, and I'm not exactly sure what the details would look like in the parking garage area, being sure that car lights and items like that would be going off the property. That's been a problem with some of the other developments downtown where the car lights are a great annoyance to the neighborhood. Also, noise issues, how are you going to deal with that? Any sort of dampening and so forth. But certainly trying to contain that all in the property.
Could we take those 2 posters down? Because I think there are only 2 of us here that are citizens from the community, and I think everyone, you know, and we've seen those, and we can't see what y'all as you talk. So that would very much help. We have straight visibility. Hey,
You don't want to see me anymore.
no, I like it. I mean, it's very good at what you say.
What's the setback north and south? They hover beyond your building.
Setback on those, we're only limited to 10 feet each.
10 feet. That you will be at 10 feet property lines. Thank you.
So you're going to do anything special? Just that question triggered. I was just thinking about the Hubbard Young, the little tieback wall that's there behind the building, and you remove all that material off of, I guess, 408. How's that topography going to look over there, exposing the backside of that building, and just from a structural standpoint?
Yeah, that's why the cast in place podium kind of backfill and support that. There'll probably be some shoring or from construction logistics piece. We'll have to backfill some of the dirt and foundation. If we go close to probably 25 feet of elevation, so that's kind of support.
Yeah, I kind of automatically rolled into a very large concrete wall there to stabilize that. I was just looking at that the other day.
If you want, I'll give you, because like I said, my main sticking points are kind of whether or not this actually qualifies for it or not. And I was going to give you the references so you guys would have them to look at the codes and things that I was talking about. It's from the Enabling Act. It's section 6-29-720. It's number 4 is the definition of a planned development district. And then 6-29-740 talks more about what the purpose and intent of that district is on the state level from the Enabling Act. And then city code is 19-501 that talks about the purpose and intent of planned developments. Yep.
So I'm looking at the same thing. This is the purpose, not the same thing, but similar. So the purpose of the CM district, to serve as the gateway to downtown Clemson by providing a transition between the downtown, the commercial corridor on Tiger Boulevard, and adjacent residential neighborhoods. Encourage the horizontal and vertical mixing of compatible uses. Place a special emphasis on the protection of adjacent residential neighborhoods. Attractive streetscape and building wall patterns, pedestrian access, on-street and public parking, and reducing curb cuts. Encourage intensities and amenities that support pedestrian-oriented uses, and promote the establishment of small business. I'm going to back up to the middle of that where it says a special emphasis on protection of the adjacent residential neighborhoods. How will you accomplish that?
Yeah, the focus, we talked about kind of the back of Knox Lane. That's why we were trying to eliminate any kind of traffic, any vehicular traffic, any kind of pedestrian traffic along there, along with any of the buffers that we were intending to do within the setbacks on the back of the building. That's why we're going to go through that, as well as none of the balconies. We really wanted to make sure any and all activity was College Avenue focused, and kind of with more of a buffer along Knox, where we look at that as kind of a no-fly zone from our perspective, kind of how we would treat that, kind of limit the impact from Knox, and obviously the imaging neighborhoods.
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, the parking, would it be gated going into the parking deck?
With the exception of public allocated spaces, it would. So we'd have kind of an access control for the true residents, and a certain level of public parking, and then retail.
And all the parking is totally underground.
How would you break that up for the public? Is there a one level is the retail and then go through another gate where you have access?
It'll probably be a flow of both, half on the first floor based upon the counts we had. There anticipates right now it's about 150 spaces per floor of parking. They have 2 levels of parking. So depending upon kind of final unit count design, we still are showing in our numbers kind of a surplus, both not beyond what we're having service for the retail users, the surplus of spaces just for general public.
Because maybe one thing that I have that I think is lacking downtown is public restrooms as well. So that may be something that would be of benefit to the community.
And I know you're just getting your feet wet, but do you have any questions about this?
Since we solved the feedback issue, does everyone have their microphones on now?
I'm sorry?
Since we solved the feedback issue, has everyone turned their microphones back on?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Do you have any idea what estimated rent would be for each unit?
Not now. It's given what we would anticipate. At best case scenario, this project wouldn't be delivered until 3+ years from now. So I think what we're trying to do is there's very limited supply for studios and 1s and 2s. So the majority in that region are kind of 3 to 4, frankly 5 units. So that is limited on that, but yeah, from what we're kind of testing kind of the general market in the region. Trying to make some assumptions from that perspective. And forecasting 2025 events.
I know this doesn't fall into the purpose-built student housing because you said that it's not the format you're using, but who is your target audience? Is it students?
It's actually everybody. So what we're trying to do, young professionals, faculty, staff. I mean, I think we kind of know what the demographics of the city of Clemson are made up of. And not still heavily influenced by the university, but what we don't want to do is be targeted solely on kind of the undergraduates there, but some of the other kind of demographics that exist to kind of support, the town and kind of the university. So by having kind of that different unit mix, allow the ability to kind of attract others. So whether that's, kind of family, faculty, staff, kind of the 3 beds or whatever, a little bit more than what exists currently.
So Spencer, right now, we're conceptually designed, is that what we are? So we've got a lot of room for adjustments.
Correct. That's why we kind of got to this level, took a time out. That was kind of the intent of this, to come forward and kind of gain everybody's.
What's the minimum height you think you would need to make this project work?
That also, I think that goes back to some of maybe the setbacks that exist within, I hear it pretty clear, some of the green space. I think that was pretty important from the preservation there. So it's, the tighter this becomes, the more it's important to kind of probably preserve the height, but it's, maybe it's one of those kind of balancing acts of how we kind of play within the design of itself. So I think what is important for us is going back now and kind of understanding maybe what we kind of pushing for and see what's economic.
Do staff have any comments or questions?
I don't at this minute.
No, I think you guys have given a lot of really good feedback. I think at least I have kind of my little list of what I'm expecting to see from you guys when you come back. And
So how about anyone from the public that wants to address this or ask questions or give comments?
Public feedback?
Yes.
Oh, that was on. Public feedback?
My name is Alan Hodges, a long-time resident. A friend that had bought the lots back.
Could you please sign?
I will sign in. A friend that had bought property in 1841, beyond 100th Road Circle, and also the lot across that's floods on Locks Lane. That would be a 101 road. It's a vacant lot, has been vacant since the plantation went away years ago. My situation is, as I told City Council Monday night, us homeowners in our neighborhood are getting surrounded. If I look out my back window, I see the parking garage at Hugh Center, Earl Street, which foolishly had the light shine out into the neighborhoods rather than in toward the cars. To my side house, I had the big Hugh Center logo shining in my side windows. Out my front, and now I have the Dixie just across the street, all 6 stores again. On the 3 million College Avenue, our developer, Mr. Murray, has spent $3 million buying every piece of ground from the edge of the youth center to Coppertooth Road Circle, including the lot that used to be on Gateway House, 102 Road Circle, nearly off that. Unfortunately, a tree fell on it, and it was turned into a parking lot for the construction workers of Dixie. Okay, so that's the first thing I wish the city would not allow, is not to have construction workers and a laydown for supplies on 102 Riggs Drive if this project goes away or goes along in any shape or form. That was just a total invasion of our residential neighborhood. And see, also on Knox Road, I own 300 feet of Knox Road. I own the entire area, which is 408's back lot, from the corner of Hubbard Young get to 408, all the way to the edge where 412 starts. My lot is right beside that, so I'm going to be very much affected by whatever pops up out of the ground there. Also, the other neighbors on Strode Circle, there is a little lady that lives, who'll be living 11 feet from a 42-foot building looming over her. And then the other neighbors, there's three or four more houses that will have this 42-foot building looming overhead. As cookie cutter tall buildings goes, it's not that bad looking, but it's just another cookie cutter building. And we haven't discussed the construction. I assume it'll be wood like all the other buildings. And you've probably heard there's a gentleman in town I guess you say he's a forensic building evaluator that has told the council and probably building architect review many times these wood structures, if the roof should happen to fail at all, the whole building is in jeopardy of coming down. We could do better. It costs more to build a steel building that would last. Otherwise, this thing will be with us. Once these buildings are built, we're stuck with them in town. You know, it's going to be the parking garage will live forever. The building, who knows how long it'll be good for. Okay, on the building itself, on the side that's nearest to Hubbard Young, the pool and pool deck does not seem to have any type of fencing or screening. I'm sure they'll have a liability fence to keep pigs from driving in your pool, but I believe on the dock side, the city requires something like a 20-foot wall to separate the Holiday Inn Drive from the noise and, you know, college kids that'll be the other side of that. So it needs to be some kind of structure there, a wall to separate that. The 15-foot setback on Knox Road just does not fly very well. You're going to have 28 apartments, you know, looming over. They may not have balconies, but there'll be, you know, college kids doing what college kids do all hours of day or night, you know, right above our little alley. When construction starts, I'd like to see a fence or a permanent wall built abutting their property to keep any construction equipment off of our Knox Road. It is an 11-foot wide area, and which is not paved to allow anything heavier than the garbage truck, I guess, is about the biggest deal because it goes up and down that. So that would need a wall to protect that. Also, I'd like to have a wall kept, if they do build this building, a wall at their property line to separate them from us on the R20 side of the street. Also, they mentioned the dog waste area, which is a problem. They're going to have a 10-foot setback on north and south sides between Hubbard and Young, their building, and the law office and other buildings on the north side. And every building seems to have more and more pets in it these days. So I would like to keep the pets on their side rather on my side. And also, there's, if y'all take the Greenville News, they have the same setup we have. The Planning Commission, you know, it looks at things, then it goes to the City Council. There's a new building that's being discussed tonight at City Council in Greenville called the Woven, which is in the village of West Greenville. It was denied initially by four things: mass, scale, density, and setbacks. I think this building exemplifies all those things. It's a massive building, 6 feet tall. Its density, it fills every inch of the lots, and the setbacks are 10 and 15, and then right to the city streets. So that seems to be way too big for the properties. The previous iterations, the last 3 iterations have been planned for this lot, actually for 412 only, have been 3-story buildings planned according to the CM. The advantage this has over those properties that it does not have any access to the Knox Road alley. The other 3 had surface parking and in and out access on the alley on Knox Road. Regarding this building in Greenville, it was turned down by the city, by city planning, as being too big, and they required it to lower the height and the density and the number of apartments they were going to allow in it. They downsized it from like 250 units to 214, and they're having workforce housing as one of the requirements for it. And that's for a little bit less than market rate housing, which is something Clemson should consider in these houses. If we're going to make something that's not exclusively for student housing, we should look into some type of workforce housing. Also, they're adding commercial spaces that are going to be allowed are leased at below market rate to provide affordable opportunities for local entrepreneurs and artists. As you know, we have plenty of vacant space in our high-rise apartment buildings. I think your pie is probably about the only one that's making $1. The rest of them are empty. So I know making space for commercial is one of the things that PD has to have, but I'd also like to see something useful going in there rather than just a for lease sign, which most of the buildings have. And so one of the neighbors asked us, since we're supposedly all going to electric vehicles, will there be charging stations in the parking garage? And the question is, if you have a Chevy Bolt or a other kind of cars that electric charging, they seem to catch on fire. Would it be a problem having a car fire underneath residential facilities? I don't know, a lot of parking garages have charging facilities, but they don't have 300 beds right above them. So that's just one little question for you. That's about the extent of it there, but I would like to say the biggest thing is no construction traffic on Knox, a wall separating Knox from us and this building to keep the kids, might say corralled. We need a wall to separate the pool from Hubbard Young and from us. And I think it's certainly need a setback, or excuse me, a step down on the Knox side. If they could knock it down to maybe 2 stories or less on Knox, that would make life better, I do believe. Because 42-foot wall is rather overwhelming as you drive through there. Well, that's about it. Any questions I can help? Elaine?
Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
Emily, did you want to speak?
Hello. Thank y'all all for serving, donating your time. Y'all have a lot to add. And I know Tanya from where she works at the Downs. We go back a number of years, and she's been excellent standing up for her community. So thank you for joining.
Emily, I know you, but could you state your name and your address?
Oh, I'm
please?
sorry. I'm Emily Hunter, and I live at 207 Wyatt. And I've lived in Clemson for 21 years. And I am in my 16th house since I got married. And I've been in 13 towns in 5 states in the United States, and 2 years when my husband had embassy duty in Islamabad. And I was bombed there, not him. As a middle school principal. Okay. And actually when we came home, after the children and I left, a few months later my husband came home, and there was a bombing. The president of the country was killed, the American ambassador to Pakistan, and the general in our office. And Alan went over as an Air Force member in an Air Force plane to bring the bodies back. And then we met in Clemson 15 years later. So we are connected. So anyhow, I've lived in all kinds of places, in a lot of different places. But we wanted to retire from a military career to a small town. And I've been coming to Clemson since my daddy's a 49 graduate, and I've been coming to Clemson since I was small. I'm a Farming Home Week girl, if any of y'all are old enough to know what Farming Home Week was. All right, so my point's on this. We have an east of College neighborhood organization, not association. We organized a few years ago, and we are registered with the Secretary of State, and we call ourselves East of College because we're east of College Avenue, and we have definitions of, geographically of our neighborhood organization. And so this building would back up to our neighborhood because Knox Lane is one of the borders. So, and we basically got organized when they were designing the Douthit Hills project. And so there were 14 of us that met with them for 7 years in the designing and building of that. So that was our first rodeo, if you will. It was a long rodeo. But these are my few points I have. Let's see. The first one is pet friendly. A lot of students have pets now, and also adults. If y'all have mixed use if you're successful with mixed use in your unit, and they do like to walk their pets. They should, but they will be coming to our neighborhoods because they like our neighborhoods. It's a very comfortable, nice walk normally. So that's something that we will have to watch out for because that can been issues, as we know, like with dockside opening. And that wasn't the first issue that we've had with these buildings. So that's just a point. My second point is retail. So at a lot of these very large student housing buildings, which like y'all are planning, the retail is required to be there on the street level. And I would bet 2/3 of it is empty around town because from what I've been told is that the rents are high. So you've got to be, as the owner of the store in there, you've got to be turning a profit. Well, when I look at where this is located, the students for lunch, the students would have to do this, whoever lives there would have to do the shopping because I don't think people are going to come there park just to go to a store there. That might be a little too inconvenient for them. They would just order it online, get it delivered. That's how we think these days. If you want to eat there, well, if there are students, they're going to be more toward campus and eat at least their middle of the day meal on campus. If you are a worker living there, a professional worker living there, you're probably going to be having lunch wherever it is you work. So I don't really know how retail is going to survive that well there. But I know y'all have to build a space, but that's just my thinking because we have so much that is empty around town and y'all can prove me wrong with that, but that's just what I see. Like My Pie does well, and the cookie store, what is it, the Insomnia cookies or whatever, that does well. But that's the only two I know that have held on and done where they're still there. The third thing is like y'all are trying to mimic or copy what the Bixby has done. Well, the Bixby to me goes into a location where their back was the rear of their property. I believe that was a floodplain. I know it was a low-lying area, and that's where they put the parking garage. They did not back up to an established residential community. We are an established residential community on the other side of Knox Lane. So the back of the Bixby is not bothering residents, and they're not residents back there in the woods and the lake looking at the 40-foot tall wall, 42-foot tall wall. It's a whole different ballgame. Okay. And if y'all, I'm sure most of y'all have driven over to the dock side, to the back, and on Holiday West, and seen how that wall is. Now, the good thing is there are no balconies, and you can't see the car lights, I don't believe, but still, it's a tall wall. And I don't know if they even have windows on that thing. I'm not quite sure. But if there are windows, you always have the potential for security lights shining on your property too. That has to be looked at. So if this building gets built, I would like to see that rear wall that faces Knox Lane, where you don't have any visible parking there, so you don't have to worry about the car lights, no balconies, where if you have to have something, it's only windows on that wall. And if you have to have, stair escapes, I understand that. That can be workable. Maybe you need to look at, do you have to have a pool? Maybe that's a needed amenity. I don't know. I don't canvass these students, okay? Maybe that's something you can take out and put into your green space. Is your pool going in the ground?
It's elevated.
So it's like, it's not, you've got, like there's a, maybe there's parking below it. But, okay, well, anyhow, just think about, do you need the pool space? Okay. So my last thing is, where's your special feature? How are you going to get it? But I think that John Crowley, you and I haven't met yet, but you had an excellent point that where's your special feature here to meet the criteria to be a PD? What do we have besides just a big box where the neighbors are going to be looking at the wall? Because the dock side, big wall to an established one street of neighbors.
Emily, will you talk to the planning commission?
I'm sorry.
The microphone, too?
Okay. The dock side was built on a residential street, and those houses are looking at, that wall. Okay. So that's what we're going to have also, all of that Knox Lane, and that's, I don't know how many houses are on Strode there. I did not go count that. Okay. But that's what they're going to be seeing is a 42-foot wall with if this is built as it is, So that's my concern. Yeah, that's not what we would prefer to have for our neighborhoods. It's not helping us retain our neighborhoods, the quality of life that we have had there. So thank you for my time.
I have a question for you, Emily, about east of College. Did y'all ever go through and see what the age of those houses are? Would this be considered like historic homes in there?
Oh, you mean the age of some of the houses that are in the east of College neighborhood, period?
Mine is one of the oldest, the same age I am, 1948. There's a couple that maybe looked at earlier, but World War II, they kept in construction, and then slowly, money and materials became available. So, late 40s is when the neighborhood basically was built up. It was planted in 1941. Nothing was really built that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, Daddy was at 118 Riggs. It was built in 1949, the year he finished Clemson. And so but there are some 1940 houses, in there. Mm-hmm. But I don't, as far as going on the historical register, I don't think there's anything in there that qualifies for that now. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do you have any additional comments, Mr. Hyatt?
No, I don't. Other than I really appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate, obviously it looked like you guys spent time reviewing this in advance of this meeting, so I truly do appreciate kind of the feedback and kind of the review that you guys had. So I think it's important for us to go back, look back and see, what we can kind of do from an economic visibility perspective, but still kind of try to match some of the goals you guys had here. So again, just want to thank you guys again.
Spencer, I got two more things I'd like to add to your list.
Sure, add it. Let's go.
I think they'd like to see the sight lines off the back of the building towards Knox, see what that's going to look like. Several different perspectives on that so we can actually see what the impact is, how you'd address that. And I'd also like to ask, on the retail piece, how much of an upfitter would you propose to do to your retail areas? One of the issues that we've had with several of the mixed-use buildings downtown is that the developer basically covered it and put a door on it and a window on it and didn't do anything to the inside. There's no HVAC, there's no upgrade on On the electrical, plumbing, et cetera, so all that cost would be shifted into someone that would lease the space, and it becomes totally,
Sure.
it's just not a viable alternative for somebody.
I can't speak to those developers. I have seen in other instances in other markets where they never intended to upfit and weren't economically relying on any revenue to ever come out of those spaces. So there was never any incentive for them to do that. I think in the instance of our project, we're just a little bit further north instead of in that core downtown. And part of the impact in our thought process with some of these setbacks and the ability to have kind of some of this green space along College Avenue, we looked at that as kind of a recruiting advantage when we're trying to recruit some of these prospective tenants there, given we kind of need to look at this in a little bit different context because the residents that will be here, we want this to kind of actually be a true amenity to them as opposed to obviously kind of right there in downtown, even though it's very close by. We look at that and we're more economically incentivized to try to find a prospective tenant that can be there and kind of upfit. So we've already kind of looked at just from the budgeting standpoint. I think we have really good data recently from kind of the retail brokerage community that's doing Bixby and Dockside now in terms of average rents, demand, upfit cost, and so on. So that's helpful for us as we kind of go into the modeling pursuit there.
Yeah, I think the Bixby and as well as the Dockside were the first time that we really talked to the developers about upfitting their retail space. Before that probably wasn't a conversation.
I mean, given its ground floor concrete podium, it's not cheap base level construction to begin with, so I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we didn't look at every single square inch along the street front as kind of an opportunity for an amenity.
And once this is complete, do you intend to manage the project or will you flip it?
We manage it, so the very quick background of Signet as a firm. I'm out of Jacksonville, Florida, but we have another office out of Ohio. We're not probably your typical developer in that we're also probably a private equity firm from a family office. So what we try to do is we look at P3 developments all the way from housing to kind of support universities and healthcare up to non-traditional companies that we own and operate. And so because of that, especially in the P3 perspective, we kind of look at it from a much longer outlook from an investment horizon as opposed to kind of a merchant developer model, which means, develop, stabilize, and flip. So that's just how we always underwrite a lot of our deals. It gives us as a firm a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we approach this. And so that's kind of the intent when we're going through a lot of these processes on other projects.
Good. Anything else pop up? Thank you very much.
Okay, no, thank you.
So back to our agenda, we have no action items for tonight. We have no advisory items for tonight. And that brings us to discussion items. And the first one is issues related to potential development of commercial area access road. Staff report?
This is an issue that was mentioned at the last meeting, and I think maybe John actually talked about if we're going to have any hope of in the future being ready for the possibility of putting in an access road along the rear of the commercial area on Tiger. It's an idea that's been out there for a while.
You're talking about along Restaurant Road?
Yes, on the back. And but because so many of those properties have already undergone some recent and are undergoing rebuilds, significant renovations, that we need to consider the possibility of creating an overlay now, for that eventuality. So we just said we'd put it on as a discussion item. So I have nothing more than that, but I figure, in terms of any detail, it's just something to see, I guess, if the commission wants to move in that direction. Particularly Jake here, you know, he'd be right in the middle of the whole thing, and has been in the middle of the whole thing with all the current changes to the property. So,
Yeah, we kind of need direction as to, are you looking at to do like a separate roadway in the back, or an ordinance requiring them to, like when new development comes in, to connect parking lots with their neighboring parking lot? Or I guess kind of how you're envisioning that going down, or for us, I mean, we do have some studies we've done in the past on how it could be done. Do you want us to like present them to you, or I guess a little guidance as to what you guys are looking at? What do you want to see?
Behind Fast River Pub, Chick-fil-A and Zaxby's on that road we've always talked about. Right. The one thing I thought I had about this is, it'd be great if we walked up and everybody said, cool, we'll tear down our buildings, we'll all rebuild at the same time, but it's not going to happen. So if you do this overlay, you've got to do your restrictions and your setup in a way that doesn't hamper basically the first guy. So, okay, like we said, we'll let them build their building closer to 123 so that they any parking or access they had there, they can move, it'll give room for that road in the back and move. But then, does that screw them up until everybody else moves forward as far as getting the flow right and things like that? I think that's, if you've got some studies that are done, like you said, because it might not even necessarily need to be a road if they're all connected and people could come out of the existing light that's already there. And I think somebody mentioned that's actually private property that it connects to. But if there's a way to get an easement or somebody, I'm sure that shopping center is going to get redeveloped sometime not too far down the future.
The one owned by the church?
Yeah.
Maybe. They're one of them things that stay around.
Well, when I say I don't necessarily mean changing to something else, but even if it's like rebuilt and the church stays there, it might be a chance to change the footprint, and we could offer them some flexibility of, hey, if you guys will let us run that road through here, we'll give you a decreased setback over here where you back up to this or that, or something like that. And I don't know if that's the easier ticket, or like somebody's mentioned in the past, where you make a right at the very end and you just basically do a big loop, like a one-way at the back, and do a big loop and come out. So when you come out of one parking lot, you connect and then just go all the way down anyway and come back out.
Well, we have a proposed design that was done by one of our interns a while back. We can at least send that out as a starting point to you guys, and then try to work from there and see. I mean, there's some challenges, but the good news is we did meet with the railroad, and they were receptive to the idea of putting the roadway on their property. Now, there are choke points on some of the commercial properties that are going to be difficult, like to make it work with what's currently out there. But
you're talking about what's currently built on site of the actual physical property.
Because the train actually gave easements to numerous property owners there to use their property. So some of the commercial development you see is actually on the railroad property. So the problem we have with our commercial districts are they're all very skinny. Basically, they don't have much depth to them. So fitting in any commercial like pretty much everywhere in the city is difficult, just because of how we don't in the scheme of like what you want for commercial development. It's not very deep. Same thing you're running into with this development here is that there's not that much room for buffer because our residential is right. You're only 150 feet in. But yeah, we can at least present to you what we've done in the past and see if you guys want to take it up and move it forward in ordinance form.
Thank you. Anybody from the public have comments about that?
I've got a question for Sherry while we're talking about that in general. What are the rules on reducing the curb cuts out there? Because that really is what the problem was. I sat through.
That's the biggest problem, and you will notice that every time something gets developed, we are reducing the number of curb cuts. So, Zaxby's now is going to have less curb cuts than they did before. It's tough, obviously. You do need to allow access to properties and traffic flow, but consolidated curb cuts would be the biggest thing we could do to help traffic on 123. The movements in and out are a huge problem. It's DOT, It's up to them to really make that decision. We have some influence during, the AR district review, but ultimately DOT does control the curb cuts there. But what are you thinking, I guess, would be my question.
I guess in general terms, because they have so many curb cuts out there on the Tiger Boulevard, that's one of the biggest problems out there. Because I sat through CRP 8050 this last semester, and one of the big takeaways that we had a large discussion with as far as traffic flow, we did talk a little bit about Tiger Boulevard, and that was one of the bigger takeaways, that we had too many curb cuts out there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things that we can talk about with that is 93 is something we should probably think about now. The curb cuts are there, so they're hard to get rid of. 93 currently doesn't have all the curb cuts. Do we want to think about putting the regulations in now over on 93 to make sure that doesn't happen? What happened on 123 doesn't happen there. Also, one of our biggest problems, is the fast food restaurants. Do we want to consider changing what allowed uses are on 123, that section? Do we want to limit the number of fast food restaurants in there? I mean, the curb cuts are one thing, it's the number of cars coming in and out that really is the issue. Just something to think about. Is that something the board would ever want to consider or talk about? Getting rid of curb cuts that are there, it's almost impossible to go in after the fact and say, take it out. I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, once they're in, it's almost impossible.
Until they redevelop it. And like I said, once you see when they redevelop it, we have been successful in cutting down the number of curb cuts.
So maybe the more relative discussion here would be to move forward with a limited number of curb cuts in other areas. Make that kind of a mantra that we want to minimize the curb cuts, and in fact, if we have the ability, we reduce them whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that was one of my takeaways for sitting through a semester of civil regional planning.
Now, do you want to look at anything about the uses allowed on that section of 123 at all, or is everyone happy with what we have out there?
Well, I think we generally say we weren't overly excited, but I'm not so sure that's
Okay.
gonna, I just don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
I mean, in reality space, I just don't think that dog will mind.
Got it.
I didn't ask if Jackie has had any comments. See what?
No, I'm good. Taking it all in. Thank you.
We're just checking on him.
Jake, I do like that idea
Thank you.
of going ahead and looking at 93 now.
Yeah, that's my big
Get out
fear is
ahead of
that, we are seeing substantial development going on in Central and pushing out to the periphery. If the same thing happens with just a bunch of fast food restaurants and that similar development on 93 come in on 123, it's going to be the same exact issue we have. And that's not.
Yeah, there's certain times of day when the kids are leaving campus going to all the apartments on 93 that it's cars on both sides of the road.
Yeah.
It's not backing up because there's not a whole lot of lights and places to stop, but it is a lot of traffic, and that'll continue to grow.
Okay.
Thank you. Next on our discussion item list is affordable housing.
And that was, John had offered at the last meeting to provide a kind of a report, I guess, on session.
Yeah, I did continuing education requirement, I guess however many weeks ago it was at this point. I've got some little notes here. Initially, this may not sound very palatable, but I think it is a solution that our city can provide if we really want to get some affordable housing without going out and buying up land. Since we have limited resources, and one of them is land in town, unless we want to put a whole lot of money into this, one of the ideas that was tossed around is instead of giving land, giving density or height bonuses. So if, say, right now, I don't think it's allowed to have a mixed-use building, and I think it's CP2 over there where Old Bilo is, all that is. So if we were to say allow mixed-use building in CP2, and we limit it, normally if you want to have just standard stuff to 3 stories, whatever the current limit is, fine, somebody can come in and do that by right, and that puts a little housing over there, a little commercial, and it's better than just a flat strip mall. But we say, okay, you want to make a little bit more money on your investment? If we'll give you a 4th floor of height, but it has to meet XYZ requirements. It has to be 20% has to be to 80% income earners, 60% has to be to 60% income earners, and 20% has to be to 40% income earners, as far as median for the area or whatever. And that's just the numbers they were tossing around. We can come up with our own specific criteria for people to qualify for, and whether it's for rent or for sale. And one of the ideas I really liked, if we go this kind of route and apartments, units, houses in the future are sold, is that if they're done through affordable housing or any kind of program like that, they are deed restricted for 20 years, where they can only be sold for the purchase price plus inflation. So in other words, an investor can't come in, somehow qualify their kid who's filing a W-2 for college to buy up one of these affordable houses and flip it for $300,000 or $400,000 5 years later when they graduate. It's deed restricted for 20 years for what you paid plus inflation. That's a couple of the ideas. I lean heavily upon, I think if we want to get serious about getting affordable, I know none of us like tall buildings. I know it. But I think that is one thing that the city can do right now to put skin in the game as far as getting it done. We all say, oh, if you want affordable housing, the city's got to put something in, the developer's got to put something in, everybody's got to put something in. And right now, that's the thing that the city can put in, is that height bonus. You can have that 4th floor. It's not going to be as profitable as your first 2 or whatever, but it's going to recoup some of your cost on your lower floors. Even if you're only making 10% off the floor, that's 10% more than you were making before, and I don't know who's not going to go for that. And if you guys have thoughts on that, and a couple of the ideas, like I said, was the CP, I don't know if you want to call it CP2A, like not necessarily go all the way over in all those kind of districts or something, but somewhere where people deem it's appropriate for access, like I said, like where the Bilo is, or that type of area along 93, and that would get you less curb cuts because you'd be going into one big parking lot into a development or whatever, and you could still have your commercial, because imagine what you could do if you took that Bilo footprint and you put even 3 stories on top of it. Now, somebody could make a whole lot more money than coming in and just putting in a strip mall, and they would probably be willing to do that 4th floor of actual affordable housing because it would be extra money. They wouldn't be losing money on it to get the other project done. That's more money in their pocket. So I thought that was a really interesting takeaway from that session, was ideas like that. If you guys have thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any place or anybody doing something like this that maybe we could take a look at?
Yeah, Greenville's doing it.
Greenville's doing it. Some of the deed restriction stuff came out of, I think the lady was from Georgetown that was presenting in the Charles there. They haven't had a lot of takers out there in the rural area because they're looking at mostly flat development for that, but I think there's some takers on the height bonuses over in Greenville.
So they're renting these?
You can do it where they can do it either way, and you just have different qualifications for those. So if you're, and they had, the way they had it, I can't remember, I told you I grabbed the wrong packet. But they had it where it was set up like, okay, if it's renting, it can be, I think it was 30% of whatever income you set up. So if we say, okay, we're going to set a standard of this or use the government standard, then rent can be no more of the, say, than 30% of the average adjusted regional income or whatever standard you're going to use. And if you were going to sell them, you could sell them for no more than, I think it was 28% of the adjusted. It's lower because you've got taxes and insurance and stuff. If you buy it, that has to be included. Basically, they don't want you spending more than 30% on your affordable housing every month. So whatever that comes down to, and a developer can choose to do it. The project that was going to go in downtown, like that would be, that's why it kind of worked out weird. But so like, say that was going into CM at 4, and I know we might not necessarily want to do that taller building downtown, but it's a good, they want to come in at 4, and we say, we'll give you the 5th story, but your 5th, and it doesn't have to be the top floor. One of those 4 floors, or whatever percentage you can have, mix them throughout the floors, has to meet these requirements or who you're going to have to rent through. And they're going to go through a program and it gets checked or whatever. And that's, I know that's set up through the city, or we do it through HUD. If we want to do affordable housing, if we want to do workforce housing, the city can set up its own standards that says, okay, you know, affordable housing is probably not realistic, but if we want to do workforce housing, because we understand that here, the student W-2s drag down the real means, so the city could set up its own, here's your baseline income, if you're going to rent these bonus ones, they rent for this much, and that recoups, that adds profit to the project and also gets the affordable housing. And all the city has to do then is allow that height bonus. And it's a give and take, and I don't know how popular it's going to be, but the city's not sitting on a whole bunch of cash to buy land and give it to a guy to build affordable housing right now.
No, I can definitely write up this ordinance. We actually have, the framework is already done. We've already done this.
Okay.
We never went vertical because we didn't think it was palatable at the time. We did density bonuses for a lot of area, basically.
Yeah, and that was one of the things they talked about was like, especially in Georgetown, they were saying, yeah, we're letting people do smaller lots so that they'll come in and develop the rural areas. But here, I don't know, even with the cost of land, I don't know that you can chop it down small enough to go horizontal.
The only thing that would potentially work, and this one again would be something we got to discuss very fully, is would we consider townhouses in our traditional single-family neighborhoods?
For like horizontal bonuses?
Yeah, if you allowed people to do townhouses in R20 and R12, if it was affordable housing, it would be another opportunity.
That was one of the things that they talked about, and I'm bringing up. I was of the same opinion. I was like, I don't know the town's going to go for that. Like, but that is one of the ways you do it. Is you say, hey, right now you build a $400,000 house because you've got to build a $400,000 house and make your money back on that lot. But if we let you build 3, then you can build them for 130 or 150 and make the same profit as you would 400.
So I get that's another thing that we'd have to discuss if that's something you want to see in the ordinance or not.
Because I think we need to take a look if we want to get serious about this and get some units in town. I think there are places we could do these height bonuses, and even if it's not necessarily a 4-story, but something along those lines, like mixed-use buildings aren't allowed in CP2 right now, right?
Correct.
If even something that simple, and we say, okay, you can build it, and you can build it by right, not by PDs. They don't have to deal with us. They come in, they do their plans. They come in and they do their plan. They say, here's the rules. If I do this, I don't have to spend $50,000 on a firm to come represent me and do plans and do this, that, and the other. And if we want to limit that to 3 stories, you can be like, hey, okay, so we're going to do 3 stories. You can do 2-story without the affordable or 3 with the affordable. And here's your rules for that. Go forth and build. Like, that kind of thing, I think, is what's going to get it done. Because I've heard workforce housing and affordable housing constantly, year after year after year, and property is not getting any cheaper, and the city has not had an influx of cash nor land. So it's not going to happen unless we find a way to put something in, and height, I think, is the way to put it in.
So the last project we approved on Lawrence Road does have workforce housing in it. Remember that was
the townhouse. It does. It does. Well, it does, but we didn't do any restrictions. Next year it can go to $1,500 or $2,000, correct? The guy just promised us it was going to be $1,400. Right. And that's my point is with this one, if you take it, there's rules, and the rules say you build this is what you're going to rent it for. Here's how you determine that.
The one challenge for that is since last community I worked for before here, we did actually have these programs in place, but we had a housing authority to monitor it. Yeah. We need a monitoring agency. So somebody has to keep them honest, we'll say. Because some entity has to be checking these rents, checking, the income eligibility of people and everything.
Would that be, that's what I'm saying is,
it's easy.
I know it's hard. Without the city creating that entity to put reporting and requirements on the developer, you're going to do it, you build it this way, you're going to submit this report, just like you file it, they're going to have to do tax returns on the building or whatever. Here, you're going to return this report in. And I'm sure that's extra burden on staff to double check that, and every so often somebody goes out and knocks on the door and says, hey, is this what you're paying for rent?
Yep.
Like that kind of thing. But there's got to be a way to get this done.
No, there is. I mean, it is, but there is going to be a monitoring aspect of it, additional, staff time.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, though. But the good thing is, if we allow, like right now in CP2, I'm sure that would increase the value of the property if you put 2 stories of residential on top of the current commercial estate, which is an increased tax flow to the city, which may pay for that person to do the enforcement.
Maybe. Just so you know, I'm also having a meeting this week to talk with our new Pickens County representative, Claiborne Linville. We are going to see if the county is there's a tax program that other counties are using to create affordable housing. It's the same program they use for industrial parks.
Yeah, fee and lieu.
Okay. So, we're gonna meet with them and actually the representatives for the Packwood Milliken project to see if there's any appetite to, at the county level, to do basically tax breaks for affordable housing, because that's the other, way we can do it. So we're gonna be meeting with them this week to try to see if we can, get Pickens County on board. It's not really anything the city can do. We're not allowed to do tax breaks, so we can't do that. But if there's another,
There's a joint county park system.
Well, I think if we could tie something like that in a tax break on top of a height bonus, I think you're really starting to create financial incentive for people to tack this stuff on the projects.
I agree. Yeah, I actually have the framework for this already written up. It'd just be a matter of me setting the bonuses. So if you want to email me or get together with me and just kind of flesh out what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any. I don't have a good radar or thermostat on the city of what to me, 40 feet to get X amount of units, especially over like in a CP2 district, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily back up to an old traditional neighborhood. Like, you've got one there, but if you built the building forward and put the parking in the back, you could have a step down and a buffer. It could be, and that's my problem. I see one spot and I hyper-focus and draw it up in my head and then don't transfer it over to, there's other CP2 lots that don't do that.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of, like, if we could work on that and get that knocked out to where it's, and I don't know, maybe Lane could put this in, like, would you see that more as a 3-story or a 4-story area? Like, something like that, like along 93, if you were going to do mixed use out there, or 2-story. I mean,
What is the height in CP2 right now?
40 feet.
40.
40 feet, 3 stories, it seems.
You can squeeze, you can squeeze 4 if you want to.
Okay.
But yeah.
But it's only commercial.
Only commercial.
We would have to, we wouldn't have to, we would have to propose and allow mixed-use buildings.
I think like what you're saying is we might need to start breaking up the city into even more zoning districts than we have.
That's what I had down here, like CP2A.
Yeah, I can't get behind putting mixed use on Tiger Boulevard.
No, that's what I actually had a note here. I was like, maybe we need to do an overlay. It's like a CP2A or something, so we're not rezoning. Or, they talk about doing a floating district where people can apply.
Yeah.
They say, hey, here's my project. It meets your standards. Please rezone me to this, and that's all they have to do. They don't have to do 1,000 conceptual stuff and change one window, or hey, if you guys meet this and you've got our affordable in there, good, go.
Okay. Yeah, we can work on that.
Okay.
So you're going to bring us some more information?
Well, yeah. I mean, making a floating zone is a whole other step of it, but I can at least give you what we have currently. I already have a affordable housing ordinance drafted that does exactly this, gives density bonuses based on percentages and everything, and it would be just filling into what the bonuses we want to give are. So I already have this, like a majority of this already done.
Yeah, and I don't know like how it would like, because like I said, I don't know if we're doing 2 and then we go to 3, like if that's 33%, but like how that works, I think of it simplified floors. Oh, you're going to do 2, however many units that is on 2, you can do another one with that many, but however many's on there, you can dice it up, like I said, between the 3 or whatever, but that many's got to meet XYZ requirement.
Yep.
And just because I'm not real familiar with it, there'd be an application process. Someone would meet the requirements to live in affordable housing by providing proof, W-2s.
Yeah. So that's why there kind of needs to be a monitoring.
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, we go through a standard leasing office, just like you would apply for an apartment now. They would have a separate form for the affordable units. They can get references from agencies in town or whatever. Hey, you guys looking for something or something, but it's basically a separate rental application that says, I make under this, you verified it, and then they rent it out. Now, if they get, I don't know what stick you're going to have to put in to keep them from renting there, because it's not like you can be like, we're going to take away your top floor if you rent out too many years in a row. But
yeah, that's the tough part. It's like, so in the last community I worked for, the person had to apply, like I said, to the housing authority, and they approved the person there. So like the actual entity, building owner did not have control over their renters.
Well, and that was the thing is, I thought where Clemson was unique, and we would need to set up a program that doesn't necessarily go to the housing authority, because in town here, you may have people that need that affordable housing that make too much to qualify for. In other words, they don't make enough to live in town, but they don't make too little to qualify for technical affordable housing.
But who's going to make that call? You know, like what happens if it's a student that works part-time? How are we creating affordable housing for families that move to the area or workers that how are we going to regulate that?
That's what I'm struggling with. That's what I think.
You cannot regulate who lives there. You just can't. No matter any program you do, you cannot regulate whether it's a student, a grandparent,
Oh no,
a
you
kangaroo.
can absolutely regulate if it's a student.
What?
You can absolutely regulate.
Okay, you can't regulate if it's a student.
Yeah, you can have it that it's not, that they cannot have a certain amount of credit hours a year. That's been held up that they don't necessarily qualify for affordable housing.
Okay, so we can look at doing something where if you're a part-time student, maybe you qualify because you're here working while you're getting it. But if you're a full-time student, if you're taking more than 12 credit hours, then you don't qualify.
Yep.
So that would be one way to do that. But as far as the other concerns is you can't just because of discrimination laws.
But our goal what is our goal for affordable housing?
To get housing that people who live and or want to live and work in town can actually live in town. Like there's a couple of police officers I've run into that live over in Central because they can't afford to live in town, but they're City of Clemson police.
And so I'm all behind that. But what prevents the units from being occupied by people that, their mom gives them a certain amount of money per month? They're students.
That's because that's not earned income. That's a gift money. If it's reported that taxes are paid on, and they file a W-2, then it counts as income. But the way you report your taxes is what officially qualifies your income. If mom gives me money and I report it as income and I pay taxes on it, then it's income. And I can't prevent that person from living.
Well, nobody's going to report that as income, so they're going to look like they're broke so they can live in affordable housing.
Yeah,
right?
We would definitely ban students from this program.
No.
But yeah, I know what you're saying.
My point being is my wife and I couldn't get divorced, and then I say, okay, baby, you pay my rent, because I also have to qualify on my own without a co-signer. That's the easiest way. You have to qualify on your own without a co-signer and meet the financial restrictions.
Yep.
Is that?
No, I understand what you're saying, but she does bring up the point of has to be somebody monitoring this. Somebody has to be looking through all these applications. Some entity has to be making the judgment call. Because we run into more of the situation was this person was qualified, and all of a sudden her boyfriend would move in 2 weeks later, and we, now instead of being, the income just doubled, and now they're no longer qualified. But there is more to this than you'd think, and relying on the private developer to do the monitoring and just reporting to you at the end of the year is a way we can do it if we decide. But that's putting some trust in them. Just saying. I mean, we can absolutely write all this up and do it. It's just, we're going to have to think about that portion of it. It's the harder part. The monitoring.
Well, I guess to avoid that, you would just put the clause in there that if you qualify, who's on your lease?
Yep.
If she leases it and somebody else moves in, that's an illegal tenant.
Yep.
Therefore, that person can't live there.
Yeah, but someone still has to find them. No, it's easier, like I said.
But it's the same with a zoning violation now. If you've got 4 people living in a house zoned for 3, you got to rely on community reporting. I mean, you guys aren't going around checking everybody's house to see how many people are staying there.
No, that's true.
I mean, and it's not perfect. I'm not sitting here saying this is perfect. I'm not.
No.
But I think the gain is there's always gonna be somebody who cheats the system. Yep. There just is. And you cannot make 100% perfect system as long as people are involved in that system.
Now, it is easier to do it if it's not rental properties, if we're doing this for sale properties.
100%.
Because that way it's on the deed restriction, and it's you can't get rid of the deed restriction every time it goes to sale. It makes it much, much easier. So, that avenue, like I said, if we're doing density bonuses for lot size and allowing more townhouses and doing only sale products, does make it easier from our end.
And maybe that's an option, is if somebody wanted to do a project where they want to own it and rent it, then the bonus units, if they did want to do all third floor, you say, okay, we're going to sell with the third floor units, and we're going to manage the rest of the building. Yeah, I mean, if that's a way to, and there's nobody saying that if we write this up that anybody on the planet is going to take advantage of it.
All right.
But I think for as much as we talk about affordable housing and workforce housing and getting something where people can live in this community, that work in this community, that we've got to start somewhere. And it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be fumble. It's going to fumble. It's going to fall, and it's going to get perfected along the way. But this is the only thing I see that the city has to put in the pot to help that happen.
No problem. We'll start an ordinance up first to start the conversation. And then it'd be allow the city, the council and everyone get on board with, how we're going to actually administer it.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, this thing might not make it 5 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just being honest, but I think that's the way to. That's the only thing I can see that the city has right now readily available that's wanted and desirable to put into the pot for people to try to get some affordable workforce, whatever your definition or what you want to call it, housing in this town is.
Jackie, do you have any comments or thoughts about this topic?
I do, but I think we can table it for a later discussion because there's so many caveats that we said before to it.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, she would wait, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry?
She said she would wait.
She has comments, but she'll wait.
Oh, okay. All right, well, I guess we can move on to the next item, which is the draft of the rental occupancy sunset ordinance. Staff report.
Yep. Yeah. You have updated maps kind of going through. Now, so you'll see there's a pretty big increase in the number because as the ordinance is written, it takes into account more than just what's in the rental housing program. So originally we only gave you numbers for what properties are in the rental housing program. But the big jumps are Tigertown Village 1 and what was always called Clemson Place. So
That's the one.
the Clemson Place is the one when you just go underneath the railroad tracks, take there and left, all those duplexes there. And so those properties were never in the rental housing program or are not in the rental housing program because they have on-site property management. And each one of them is basically 100 units, so almost 200 beds, just those two. So that's why you're seeing that very large jump in the numbers.
Now, originally RM3 and 4 were not included.
Originally, RM3 and 4 were not included in here. And, I was instructed to put in everything.
Okay.
And just, Now, but the big numbers are, those two properties you're talking about, it's RM1 and 2. Well, RM1 is really the big one, but RM1 and 2 are where the developments, like those type of developments are. And I do have a large version of that map if somebody would like that to look at.
A large version of this map?
Yeah.
Just hit
Take a look at all.
No, that's the old. This one's updated. We're saying the old one doesn't. The big one we have doesn't have all this on it.
There you go.
What do all the little numbers mean?
Oh,
Street numbers?
yeah, the little numbers are their addresses.
Are there addresses?
Yep.
Okay. So when it says 112, 112, 112, it's because it's multi-units?
Yeah, because they all have the same address too.
Like 112A, B, and C.
I'm just looking at the very center of that. It's in mostly.
Yeah, that's the.
It says
Where is that? That's
112, 112, 112, 112.
All right, you're in two. Oh, for what is it? 93, right?
No, that's, 112 is off of, 133.
No,
That's
No.
133 right there.
yeah,
Oh, my bad.
133's over here.
Yeah, I got you.
I think it's 93,
That's,
isn't
I
it?
forget what they call it.
I think it is.
The one's behind Old Wilo, what are those, what's that place called?
That's called the varsity.
Varsity, that's it. So she was asking why those are all 112.
They're, because it was done as a tract development, that's how they were addressed at the time. They're all on one property.
Okay,
You'll
that's,
see some variation on how things
So
are
it's like
addressed
unit
over the
one
years.
and 112,
Sometimes you'll see
but
one
it's-
variation.
Yeah, and they change, that's how they're displayed.
But so, as the ordinance is currently written, we're talking about 448 beds that would be eliminated over time. And the breakdown you see next to the numbers are, next to the zoning districts are the number of properties. Now, I also have the hard data if you want to see the,
Jay, does the Grange, when someone sells one of those properties, do they lose their
that is correct.
grandfather status at that point, once it changes hands?
Yes, any sort of change in hands or ownership of the Grange, they lose their grandfather rights.
And that's just for this first section?
That's only for this first section of the Grange, phase one of the Grange, and that was done by agreement between the city council as part of the annexation agreement.
Okay.
So that is addressed in our ordinance. The Grange is handled slightly different from everybody else.
Ordinance different. It just adds.
But if the person, same person keeps the house 60 years, they keep that?
They keep that grandfather rights, that's correct. And that is a provision that, so if you see how the ordinance is written, that any time a property is sold, and this is everybody, not just the Grange, they would lose their grandfather's rights, or when they came to these time designations by zoning district.
and and all the sections to come that are being built will not have that in it. It's only this first section.
Oh, the upcoming parts of the Grange?
Yeah.
That's going to be what's negotiated depending on what the zoning district is and what, yes, I'm sorry, this whole grandfather thing, no, that will be in the future
Just for
section of
that
the
first
Grange,
section.
correct.
And is
That's
it
only because
possible
they're already
that
under
if we
construction.
move forward with this sunsetting idea, is it possible to eventually put a sunset date on those as well?
No, because they did an agreement with council. It's no.
Okay.
They're going to be upon sale. I don't think that we could go back because it was part of an annexation agreement. I don't think we could change ordinance on that.
Well, I know, but part of that annexation agreement was that the entire thing is going to come up for a PD in a couple of years, right? And that's
Yep.
going to include the existing stuff?
That's the intention.
Okay. So that, whatever is discussed, and I'm not saying this is a way to get rid of those grandfather right, but the current stuff will be overwritten by the PD because all PD rules and regulations apply to all property in the PD.
Yeah.
So it'll have to be written into the PD for them to keep it as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thoughts, comments? Questions? Do we have any public comments?
I'm sorry, I did not.
Do I need to sign in again?
You're good.
All right, I'm Emily Hunter. I did not do my homework for this part, this agenda item, but I stayed because I don't quite understand. I did not read what we're trying to do here, but I do own three houses, and two of them are grandfathered for three because we've had them. We purchased them in 2003, so they got grandfathered. And they're in the east of College section neighborhood. So what's going to happen? What's the plan?
Okay.
If they are downgraded, if they're in an R20 district at the July 1st of 2024, they will only be allowed to have a maximum of 2 unrelated occupants. instead of 3. There's a table here that's got it scheduled where each district will have to come into compliance, and basically it will get rid of any variation where everybody in town has to play by the same rules.
Okay, so y'all changing the game rules of what, when we purchased, a number of houses were grandfathered in. And we go by the rules. In fact, we have single-family people because we don't rent to students, except in a condo that's in a student complex. So what you're saying is you want to change the rules. For what reason?
No, we're going to sunset the exceptions.
Yes.
We're going to sunset the exceptions.
The rule stays the same.
All
The
property
exceptions will be sunset.
Yeah.
But I think what she's saying though is that if she's renting to a family, they would be related, so it wouldn't fall under the same.
No, I'm just saying right now we do rent to families, but the property, the 2 houses that are grandfathered, where we can have 3 unrelated people, okay, well, that's how they were when we purchased them, and so they were grandfathered to stay in, okay. And so, and Tal and I came before and spoke when it tried to get changed some years ago, because there were a number of people at that time that had, houses that were grandfathered. And that's a value to the house, to the property, because I've sold investment property to people, to buyers, and that adds value to a house. They pay more for it if a house is grandfathered like that. Now, to be honest with you, the houses that we own are in the east of College area, and they're very walkable to campus. And with what's happened in the last 10 years, in our neighborhood, that 3 designation may not matter for us because we've got walkable to campus and people are paying. I also have a real estate license in South Carolina. So, I sort of know what things sell for and how they sell. And it's been very interesting. So, but I'm just saying that, we were grandfathered out. When did this start? Like in 2003 or 4?
The ordinance, passed in
5? Yeah. 2005? Okay. Yeah, because we purchased our houses here in 2003. And we always kept a house in our hometown to go back to in case, with my husband being in the military. You never knew. So we always kept a house I could go back to. So when we moved here, we moved our rental property here. So that's how we have the rental property. But, so we got grandfathered in 2005.
At least and I can explain this to you from my school of thought on this, is that there's two kind of issues with it. One being that by having the perpetual grandfather that can transfer as long as then the government has artificially created a commodity that is restricted to only people who are around. In other words, I can't build a house right now and attain that same commodity in a free market. The city has artificially interfered with the market. 2 is the city has a zoning ordinance which deems what the town has come to accept as acceptable densities in an area. You can have 2 unrelated here, you can have 4 unrelated there, you can have 3 unrelated there. So if it's acceptable to have 3, then everybody should be able to have 3. If it's acceptable to have 2, then everybody should have 2, not because of a financial thing or this, that, or the other, but because that's what has been deemed acceptable by the zoning. If we want to change the densities to where everybody plays by the same rules, okay, but I think the idea behind this is to get everybody playing by the same rules, where it's not, I come into town today and I might have 4 people living beside me over here and 5 people over here, but I can only have 2. So now my house is worth less, like you said, because I can only sell it as a 2 occupants, but I've got 4 and 5 over here, so now it's worth even less.
the idea, I think, is to make it a fair level playing ground where you don't have special exceptions. It's not necessarily taking away the rights, and we discussed it was 2005, it's been 17, 18 years.
How many houses, how many single-family houses are grandfathered for 3?
How many single-family houses?
Yeah,
That would be probably around 100.
okay. So are you having problems with them? I mean, are people complaining about what goes on there, or?
Not particularly compared to any other rental property.
Okay.
I think what John was explaining is probably a rationale for wanting to.
Yeah, it's not necessarily they're causing a problem, it's more that the original thought is that the city has artificially interfered with the market in the housing market here. By doing that, by creating a commodity, like you said, by giving you that special exception, and there's no more of them that are going to be created. That's it. There's a finite number of them, and that number can get smaller. So yours might only get more valuable. The city has created that and doled it out to those who were here at a certain time, and it is now unavailable to anybody else. So that restricts, and it also incentivizes non-ownership, if that makes sense, in the single-family neighborhoods. And it's not to say that rental housing isn't important, because it is, because there's not everybody needs to buy a house. There's people that are here short-term, guest lecturers are here, things like that. Rental housing is very, very important, and I completely understand that. But I think the main concept of the city artificially creating a commodity is one of the major driving factors of this.
Well, it got created in 2003 because, I mean, some people were having 4 people live in a house. And actually, in our neighborhood, we do have a house that has 4 people living in it.
And that's because it was grandfather, whatever you had at the time.
This house is not grandfathered.
It's not?
No. I know.
All in the report.
What's the address?
Do you have the address?
No, not in my head, but I know which ones have the special, what do you call it, designation?
Yeah, grandfather rights.
Yeah, I know how to get hold of you. No, I mean, it's like, yes. I mean, you know, we have a condo at Daniel Square that I inherited. My father purchased that, okay? So, and next door, you're only supposed to have 3 people in there, okay? So they got 4 people in some of those units, you know? Yeah, I found that out. And you talk to the students, you find out what's going on. It happens everywhere.
Well, I think that's one of the ideas here is to kind of, one, if it's happening outside the allowed occupancy, it's breaking current code. And if you know about it, we'd appreciate it if you reported it. Because all this stuff was put in, restrictions on density and stuff is put in for certain reasons. It's what people deem acceptable. Now, that acceptability can change, like I said. Like if city council may say, you know what, instead of taking or limiting these houses to 2, we're going to raise everybody to 3. And that would be a fine solution too, because then you've still gotten rid of that commodity of the artificial, you have 3, they have 2. So if everybody goes to 3, then everybody's at 3, and that artificial interference in the market is eliminated that way as well. But I think what most people are going to say in town is that they would rather have it go down to 2 than have everybody come up to 3 in order to deal with that problem. And I'm not saying that either one of those is right.
But so who is saying that they, has somebody come to you and recommended that you do this, or say you need to be fair, or this is something that you have come up with?
This is something that I came up with. I think I was the one that originally proposed it, but we talked it over, and as far as moving it forward, it's one of those things to where, like I said, it's a driving factor of, it's the same thing with the PD. The PD is there, it has defined rules. If you don't fit into that, you don't get it just so you can get 20 more height. It's not there to manipulate a market. You bought CM, and they sold it to you as CM for X dollars. And now you're going to turn around and just apply for a PD, and it's more valuable just because it doesn't make sense. It's the same thing with this. We give you 3 just because you happen to own it in 2003, now that's an added value to you. That's the city putting its influence on the market. And that's my biggest issue, is not necessarily that a family of 8 who are all related are less impact than 3 students. It's more of that artificial interference with the free market. And I don't think cities have any business being in that business. That's my main argument. It's because I understand that if there could be a family, there's a family of 7 or 8, I think, that lives a couple houses behind us. And I understand that they are
related?
What? Yeah, oh yeah. It's a mom and dad and 5 kids, all related. Perfectly fine.
A few years ago, didn't we have a number, much larger number than that in one house in Country Walk?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is I'm not saying
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about how many people are in the house. It's more of the artificial interference with the market that the city is doing. This is an artificial pressure put on the market. It interferes with the sale price. It interferes with rental prices. And it's done by a government body. And that's my problem. I might be wrong. People can tell. It's my opinion. It's been floated and discussed. People can tell me I'm whatever about it. That's fine. I may be 100% wrong, but that's how I feel about it. And that's, I think, was the crux of bringing it up. Was to get
I have not done the research on this. Okay. I don't know where, and this would take a lot of research, and I'm not into doing that. But if you took all of the single-family houses that were grandfathered with 3, Cal may speak to this, but I think with the price of housing at the level it is now in Clemson, because Cal has a sales license also. Okay, so I don't think at this point that is going to make that much difference, because our house values have gone up so much. I don't, yeah. Back when it was a difference, but I don't think it is now. Especially in the neighborhood in east of College.
One of the first things you said was that your grandfather's rights added value to your house.
They do add value, but...
So that's an artificial manipulation of the market.
They do add value, but I think that you, in some locations where these houses are, just the location is going to give them all the value that they need to sell. That's what I'm saying. Get top dollar.
And if that's the case, then getting rid of the grandfather rights will have no negative impact on our house, correct?
Some houses, no. Some houses, yes. Yes. And so you're taking away from these owners. That's my bottom line. You're taking away.
Like I said, and if anybody else wants to jump in, they can, but from my view, it's not taking away, it's more of leveling the playing field, if that makes sense.
I don't think anybody's looking to get the playing field leveled.
Well, of course not, but it's not the job of the government to make it unfair on people.
What I'm more concerned about is a citizen in this community, okay? And I've been here, this is the longest I've ever lived anywhere in my life. What I'm more concerned about is how we have had the growth of these large buildings, like we discussed tonight, all over, that have not been done as well as they could have been done.
Okay.
And the traffic issues that we have, and the people who live downtown, a number of people, those people, they want to leave now. They don't want to be there anymore.
Okay.
That's eroding it has eroded the quality of life. Okay? I mean, even the noise level in downtown is much more. So that's my concern, that we, the citizens, have not been, it seems like anything that any of these builders want to do, to come in, to do whatever, is okay.
This has nothing to do with buildings. This would be lowering the density in R20.
Well, okay, no, but we still have the big buildings that have come in and they've changed, and we can't go back. You can't roll that back, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So it looks like we, the single-family owners, get taken away from, but if you're a big business, big building coming to town, let's roll out the red carpet.
So you
I'm
would
not
like,
giving that, but I'm not saying that for y'all.
so
I'm just saying the previous.
we're still in the discussion phase on this. You, as a citizen, you would rather see every house allow 3 people than have the grandfather taken away to 2.
I would say I would leave alone houses.
In order to make it fair, the same rules need to apply to everybody.
No, I think I'm a bit older than you are.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to, my point here, I understand.
I'm not
following.
coming from trying to be fair. I'm trying to say that we the owners back in 2003.
Right.
That was a decision, 2005, I guess, 2005. That was a decision made then to move forward. And that's something that, the city gave their word. So now you're taking your word back.
I am not taking my word back. I was a student in 2005.
No, I'm saying that the city the city made that decision back then. I don't think any of y'all were involved in that. But that is going back on something that.
Grandfather rights are not.
What now?
Grandfather rights are not unlimited.
The city also changed the zoning height on all the downtown property to reduce the density. So would you rather the city not have done that?
No, that needed to get done. It didn't need to be that high.
Can I ask you I'm going to give you 3 more minutes.
No, I'm through. I didn't have to talk
Okay.
that long on that.
All right.
Good evening. Tal Slane, 100 Devonshire Court. I'm unsure where, why, how, and when municipalities operate with a sense of fairness. Somebody could have just built a building, adhered to all of the rules. Their neighbor learns of a new government incentivized, you can have another story or 2 on your building if you do X, Y, and Z. Person on the left, person on the right, never got that opportunity. Can't do it now. It's completely unfair. Building could be 1 month old, building could be 10 years old, etc. But it's not fair.
They could tear it down and rebuild it. Now, I'm not saying that's economic, but that same opportunity is available to everybody.
Let's keep the conversation serious.
Okay.
No one's going to tear down a building that was just constructed so they can add a floor. Okay? It's not economically viable, like you just said, because it's unfair what the municipality did. They changed the use of the property, just as they did along College Avenue. It's not fair because across the street at Bixby, or at Campus View, or at Earl, or at U Center. So we can't have it both ways. If we're interested in fairness, let's open up that discussion as to why height restrictions have changed. Let's not focus on the minutia of 100 properties where commitments were made by the city at the time about doing things. But also, we talked about affordable housing. These 100 houses that currently house, if legal, 300 kids. 100 of those kids will have to find somewhere else to live. That's not fair, number 1. Number 2, and they would literally, the city would move them out, make them leave their residence, because it's now against the law to live there.
Well, actually, you're
on
going
a certain date, right? Now, I say it kind of tongue-in-cheek because you don't have the authority to do it. You can't do it. As long as somebody renews their lease, that's going nowhere. Before I forget, I wanted to mention, I'm a real estate professional. She's a real estate professional. I have clients, etc. None of us, without digging down and finding this PDF, knew what sunset meant. Didn't know what it meant. Okay? You guys pride yourself on transparency, and you're sunsetting an ordinance. I'm telling you, the average homeowner doesn't know what that means.
That's a fairly common term.
I mean, I served on with Curtis on the Board of Architectural Review, and there were many terms that were common in municipal jargon that are not common to a homeowner.
That may be a fair comment.
But I want to stay on the fairness. So someone bought a house last year, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, and their realtor told them, this house is special. It's got a license for 3. And as long as you behave, you're properly managed. We have an ordinance that says you have to be, I believe, 50 miles. You have to have a licensed property manager within 50 miles. Noise ordinances, trash ordinances, parking ordinances, they all apply. You step out of line with this, we're going to take your rental license away from you. That property goes vacant for 120?
120 days.
You lose this special license. Okay? I think that's fair because you were told this is the do's and don'ts. What you're doing is you're telling someone, hey, I know you just bought that house, but on July 1, you can't do what you're doing. But you think you're being fair to everyone who hasn't said anything about fairness. Your heart's in the right place, but this is very misguided. Apart from really treading on property rights, because you have people who have, my management company, I even have a client who has a license for 3. They paid the city 3, 4, 5 years for that rental license when they were living in it, because they knew this is not our forever home, and when we leave, we'll be able to rent it to 3 people. Okay? There's a lot that's not fair that the city is solely responsible for. Is it fair that I pay a ton of money for the rental? Is it a permanent license? $100 per door for my properties. Nobody pays it at Bixby. Nobody pays it at Dockside. Nobody pays it at the Woodlands. Nobody pays it at the Retreat. Well, maybe now they pay it at the Retreat. Nobody pays it anywhere, right? It's only the single-family houses. But we're interested in being fair. This simply isn't the facts. And I have said for years, if we're concerned with all of these things, safety being one of them, that's why we have to inspect these houses every single year. We have to make sure that no one under the cover of darkness removed an anti-tip on a stove or took out a ground fault outlet. We have to make sure that the handrail that was there last year is there this year. But we're never going to even look at condo buildings that were built to outdated codes by today's standard. We never even inspect it. Not once every 5 years, every 10 years. It's never been done. They don't do it. You have floor after floor after floor. If there's a catastrophic event, you've got hundreds of people in a building that you haven't looked at because you're too busy making sure the anti-tip on a stove is still there, that I've been doing since 2005. And it just doesn't, the optics are so bad. Like, what are you doing as a municipality? Not planning commission, but what are you doing? You're saying it's about safety. You're ignoring the bulk of your rented units.
I've never said it was about safety.
I'm saying the city has said repeatedly, they're on the record with their legal counsel that this is being done to ensure the safety of the tenants.
Can we get back to
this issue? Show me, I didn't bring fairness to the equation, you did. So
I know, but now you're talking about safety.
I'm saying it's not fair that some are inspected and some are not. It's not fair that some can do this and some can't do that. But you're caught up on, like, you're passionate about the fairness of this sunset.
Of each zoning district having the same rules and regulations.
Until they don't. Right? Like, you got one side of the street and then you change it. The municipality changes it. But it's fair?
If it's zoned R12 over here and R20 over here, everybody in R20 has the same rules and everybody in R12 has the same rules.
Okay, so if it's zoned CM here and CM here,
Then both CMs have the same rules.
Can
they
we get back to
don't.
this?
You just changed the height on one side of the street.
We need to get focused on the sunset thing with the occupancy levels, not fairness and not commercial and not anything else.
Respectfully.
Thank you.
Several people spoke. They didn't get gavelled. I'm making a point. No one else is engaging.
But I've asked you twice already to get back to the point of what this discussion was.
I am very curious why Planning Commission would take it upon themselves under the guise of fairness to take away something from owners, either in her case since '05 or in someone else's case who bought a house last month. Okay? In the same breath with affordable housing, but we're now going to have places that had three, they could divide the rent three ways, now can only be divisible by two. So I'm unsure that you're getting where you want. I'm unsure why it's even a consideration. What problem are we solving? Like I'm just asking, like, what's the catalyst? Like, where did it come from? That's my question.
Thank you. Commissioners, other comments or thoughts?
Nothing from me.
Jackie?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know what our next steps are.
So the next step, if you guys want you want the ordinance to move forward as it's currently presented?
Do you have any concerns about how it's written on here?
I didn't get the updated one until, I thought I had the updated one until 5 minutes ago.
Well, the ordinance hasn't changed.
Okay.
Yeah, the ordinance is the updated one. Should all have.
So we've got R20, R12, RM1, and RM2 in item number 1, but you're going to add RM3 and 4 and patio homes?
That was my understanding after last meeting of what you guys wanted. Yes. To have
So
all.
what is it about RM3 and 4 that would need to be changed? Aren't they already set with the number of occupants they can have?
They are allowed 3 and 4 occupants. There
Right.
are some properties with more. Not many, but there is 12 in the R3, and there are 1 in RM4.
And so what would that allow? In the RM4, what does that one look like?
4. Occupancy of 4.
Okay, but what's the grandfathered in one?
Grandfather in one? I think it has 5. I have to go check on that. It's only one property.
John, can I ask you one more thing? I totally forgot.
5. Sorry.
Sure.
Not to get into discussion, just one thing. You guys said that the range being annexed in, that those guys, they don't lose it at any time unless they sell.
That's my understanding because of the deal that the council gave, the agreement the council made with them.
No, exactly. So a deal gets cut to that neighborhood, and they get a special dispensation that goes until the end of time. We get assurances made to us in 05 that somehow it just not happened.
But the RM4 property has 5 people in it.
And the RM1, which is the bulk number here, we discussed how many of those were patio homes that will fall into the 2040.
Yeah, well, see, yeah, there's not that many. The bulk of those are not patio homes, technically, because that's not how Tigertown Village 1 was not created as patio homes. None of the duplex developments are patio homes. But a good amount of them are. So the farm and the varsity are both patio home developments. But the one off was at Dove Circle is not. So it's just the ones that are actually created under the patio home development. So that is the farm the Varsity, and the Bamboo Cottages.
Okay.
Because I had a question about one of the how the Bamboo Cottages, and that's because they were patio homes, right?
Yes, the first half of it is.
Right.
The first half is Bamboo Cottages. They have a grandfather right of 3. The second half was, they were kind of getting developed right at that border. So the ordinance got changed, and the second half only has an occupancy of 2.
So there are 2. The new ones all have.
The newer ones are 2. Yep.
Okay, I have a question. So, I understand where the city of Clemson has given special privilege to certain homeowners that rent property. So, then again, now the city of Clemson will be imposing, will be taking away that privilege. So we're going to be causing some homeowners' homes to decrease in value, right? Based on a government interfering is going to immediately drop, right? The price of some homes.
Depending on how you value the home, whether it's done on an income model or on a standard appraisal model. And it depends. It's not. Here's the thing. Everybody's assuming that if the house at 101 wherever street rents for $2,100 right now to 3 students, that there's not a family that counts as one person that will still pay $2,100 a month for that house. That's the big argument assumption here, is you're going to lose value because you can't put 3 people in there to split $2,000 in rent. That's the argument. And there's no guarantee in that. And if that is the case, then the city's artificially inflated rent prices by saying you can split your rent 3 ways, but you can only split your rent 2 ways.
But then I guess my point is then the city's now going to intervene again and change things. I don't know. I'm too new at this.
No, it's fine. And that was one of the things what I was getting into a second ago when you were asking about moving forward or whatever. Since this is your first night, and I think it is important that everybody has input on this or whatever, if this is something that is so important that we table it until next meeting so that you have a chance to get caught up in this, because I definitely don't want to put you on the spot where you feel like you have to vote on something tonight or anything that you're unfamiliar with.
We're not going to vote on this. Before this goes for vote, just to be very clear, I'm sending out notice to every property owner that's being affected by this. Because it's the equivalent of a zone change, that's going to be done. So, I want everyone to be very comfortable with the ordinance and, feel like they can justify their votes and stuff. Because, right now, we have not notified anyone about this. At some point, we are going to.
The public notice requirement, we've met all of those.
Whenever something that affects a specific property owner,
This is the equivalent of a zone change, so it would require a notice.
Okay.
So, now, I try to stay out of, the policy, as you guys think. The one thing I do kind of feel like I need to say as a staff representative on this is, do keep in mind that there is always unintended consequences for any ordinance. This ordinance is going to eventually displace 450 people that we will need to accommodate. Well, sorry, they're going to have to live somewhere. And, there is the whole debate as to, are we doing dense development close downtown, walkable, or on a transit line? Or are we going to allow the development to occur outside the city and expect everyone to drive their cars in? So just keep that in mind as well as this has to be taken a holistic approach. Other parts of you might have to look at keep that in mind when you're looking at other developments in the future as well. That's what I'm saying. If this does pass, that we should be.
So I asked
mindful.
Andy a question about this, something I was doing a bunch of reading about yesterday about grandfather's rights and what you could do and what you couldn't do, and I ran across this statement and I asked him about it. I need to find the source of it because I think it might be worth looking at, but there's a part of this discussion there was a focus on converting student rentals back to owner-occupied homes by offering economic incentives to potential buyers through the TIF money. And I don't know if that would work or not, but I'm going to get more information about that. But that might be one thing in terms of if you wanted to sell your rental house, for example, let's work to get it back to a single-family home. And this may be a way, some incentive for that property owner to do that. But I'll need to find that source and get more information about it.
I'd like to say something about transparency. When Clemson, we first moved here, Clemson University.
Come to.
All right.
When I came here in 2001, and we live right where Bradley Street dead ends into Wyatt. We own 209, and 3 years later we bought the house next door, and that's our primary residence, and we rent 209. We're at 207. So when I first drove through the married family housing area, which is now Douthit Hills, I said, in 10 years, this is not going to be this. It's just like when I went to work at the Oconee Hospital. I said, in 10 years, GHS is going to own me. And they didn't like me, but that's what happened. So you can see the future. So Clemson University, a few years after I moved here, had a meeting. They had several meetings about what they were going to do with the married family housing area. And the bottom line was that they were not going to put any students across Highway 93. It was going to be buildings for desk research and administrative offices. And they had those meetings at the Madron Center, and they had in different weeks and different times of the day. They had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings, so everybody had an opportunity to go. And that's all they wanted to tell us. I thought, okay. So then a few years later, I found out that there was another meeting because I read the agenda, and my husband and I were the only ones that came to city council, and the university was there doing a presentation to the city council, not planning commission, about how they were going to build Douthit Hills and how that was going to affect the city. That's 55 acres they're developing there, folks. I mean, y'all know what Douthit Hills is. So I stood up and said something. This is, why are you coming to city council when before you had all those meetings, when you were going to tell us what you were not going to do, They really didn't advertise what they were doing. That there was no transparency there. I was very disappointed in that. So I think when y'all are trying to change this rental, 3-person rental license issue, it's better to go on and mail those letters out to all of those people now, so those owners can get into this discussion at the beginning. So they feeling is different than thinking and believing. They feel like you're being honest with them and transparent with them, okay? And to me, Sunset in this town, we have a number of Sunset subdivision type names, and so that's sort of what came to my head when I read this at first, but I thought, no, Sunset might be, they're putting to sleep. They're stopping something, like how y'all are trying to use that word, sunset. So that's why I stayed. I came to talk about this new complex that's going to affect our neighborhood. But I stayed to find out what this was about, but I couldn't pull up all that verbiage on my phone. So I evidently didn't print out the most important piece of homework for me to come to this meeting. But just transparency. We have our character and our integrity, and the transparency of what you do is part of that to me when you're representing, the city. That's what I think.
So everything that the planning commission discusses is public and transparent.
It is, but we have to know what's on the agenda.
You should get an email blast.
Well, I did, but
okay.
I didn't understand that either. I got the email, and I did sit and print out. I print out everything about this. I got it all back here. I didn't do the sheet on the last.
Jacob sending out a notice to every landowner.
So if we go forward, so kind of the next step for this is that we would vote and then it goes to city council as well for them to
public hearing.
have a hearing.
Yeah, so we would notice, we'd have a vote here at the planning commission. Then would be scheduled for the public hearing from the city council. Then it would go in front of the city council for 2 readings.
That's assuming they decide to take it up.
Correct.
They don't, yeah, I mean, this, what we're doing is a recommendation. And if nobody has an objection, can we put a parentheses or a definition of sunset if we move forward?
Oh, absolutely.
Can we put an explanation of what sunset is in those notifications?
Certainly.
Okay, so we talked about not doing anything in January to give Tanya a chance to get caught back up with everything. So do you want to make a motion that we put this on the agenda for February?
Oh, that's fine. We can move it to February. Just make a motion to put this topic on the agenda, or to have, like, in February? Okay.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
I really don't think we needed an amendment to do that. It's a discussion item. I personally recommend that we continue to carry it monthly until we have some general agreement and have some additional input from the public.
Well, so you want to, how do I undo that and bring it back up for January? Make a motion to reconsider?
It's a discussion item. It's not an action item.
It's just a discussion.
Yeah.
We're not.
I mean, we can keep it on discussion item, but it won't be put on the agenda for an actual formal vote until at least February.
Okay.
When are letters getting mailed to properties?
I was not planning on doing that until we were formalized on the ordinance. I was going to send them a copy of the ordinance you guys were proposing. That seemed most prudent to me.
So at the earliest, it would be after the next meeting. Right now is what we're saying.
At the earliest, it would be after the next.
Yeah, we don't have an approved
ordinance.
Yeah,
And if we vote it down, then it just dies.
correct.
Well, once again, it's a recommendation, but I mean, this is the third meeting we've had this discussion. So we're just continuing the discussion. It's not an action item at all.
No, I mean, at some point, we have to put it, we should, the normal course of events would be that we put it on a vote, put it on for an action item vote at some point, but ultimately, Chairman Lane, you can either put it on the agenda or not put it on the agenda if you don't want it. If you just want it to die, you can let it just not go on the agenda again. Or just put it off for however long, or we can set it for an actual vote so we have a formal thing. I think that we do have to send out notice before we have a formal vote. That's all I need to know.
And you better give 2 to 3 weeks minimum notice. And with the holidays, so
We'll continue the discussion in January and then decide moving from there what to do.
Yeah, because once you get caught up, I would like to get some input and thoughts from you on this as far as, because you brought up a couple points that are new to the table and, get fully involved.
Any other thoughts or comments about that? Questions?
No, they are marching orders.
Let's go to staff reports. Is staff prepared to present?
I don't have anything as far as a separate staff report. Just thinking about trying to sort out where all actually probably more in terms of the council meetings coming across what I was kind of thinking about. But that's, so we can talk about where things stand, because I know there have been several.
Yep, all the ordinances that have been making their way through, they've all passed at this point.
Okay.
So
Caught up with that.
yeah, we're all caught up with those ones. So
Okay. Is there any public hearing or anything hanging out? I don't know anything.
Nope.
Yeah, we're caught up.
And we don't have any action items on council's agenda from the planning commission.
No, so it's taken care of.
So we're good with that.
This month.
Do we need to plan any future workshops or other events? And maybe what we do need to do is get down to, once we nail this down a little bit more with the occupancy, is
Yeah, if you,
think about a workshop for that.
Yes, and that's really what, if you invite the public, that's probably what you would be inviting them to, would be a chance to discuss, interact much more before you formally move to vote on something.
Right.
I really recommend not trying to do that the same night as when you have the first interaction, I mean, you're going to have a good crowd. That's different. But when you're having a session where you're really focused on, hearing and discussing with that, it's much easier. Even if you have to call a special meeting or something to fit it in within the time frame that you want, I recommend keeping that separate. So I would think that would be whenever we get everything finalized where we're at, we want to be with the language. And I don't know, what about, a joint council session to see at what point? I mean, we mentioned it a time or two, but that would be something to consider.
But that'd be because that would, if there's just no appetite for them, that would save us investing a whole lot of time.
That's what I'm thinking, because this is, we knew that this is not going to be popular with everyone. Yeah, this will be with a lot of people though. So gauge where council is on the issue.
Yeah, I mean, if there was 7-0 no, then there's no point in us spending an evening entertaining, getting yelled at or anything.
But I think we need, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what's the general citizenry think about this issue?
Exactly.
And how do they feel about it? And, are they feeling like there is a disparity in terms of their house values of their own house as a result of this occupancy agreement that we have in the city? And I'm just wondering, listening to the gentleman, what does the general citizenry feel about this? Are they concerned, as you're raising? And maybe they are. I just don't know. I just don't know. So, but if they're not upset with it, what's the problem we're solving by changing the rules if nobody's upset about it? No. And I'm not sure it's worth the effort. I'm just thinking of our federal government and what they do. Let's not do the same thing. I don't know. And how do we find that out? How big an issue is this?
That's a tough one.
I'm sorry, Jacob?
Well, that's going to be tough because, most of the people who are going to come to the meetings are going to be the ones who are affected by it.
Right.
The average citizen is going to be very hard to kind of...
You can knock on doors and talk to your neighbors,
right?
Because this is a recommendation and not one of our quasi-judicial ordeals, so we can discuss it outside of meetings, correct? Yep. So, speaking of that, not taking over hijacking topics, Conversations with Council is Thursday night at Fire Department, which is an informal setting for people and citizens to come and talk about things. It's a great opportunity to have, you're not limited to 3 minutes. It's a good back and forth. I've been to a lot of them. Sometimes a lot of people show up, sometimes people don't. The indoor ones do tend to have a better turnout. You can go, I usually go and just listen unless somebody has a specific question that I can address, but it's a good way to get your ear onto a bunch of little topics that are important to people, but not large enough necessarily to make it to us, but something that we might be able to do. And back to what you got. Seems like a good way to stick in the conversation with council.
All right, so may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll give you a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor? Jackie, are you good with that?
She adjourned already.
Amen.
Will do.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
we are just.
So,
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That was